Chapter 26, Locked Chest. Why wouldn't I be able to? Nie Yan chuckled as he sent Tang Yao a trade request. After the latter accepted, he placed the fire chaser set and a single return scroll inside the trade window. Why, you're giving all of this to me? Tang Yao stared out with a blank face. He never thought the fire chaser set would have such high property bonuses. I got these off of Jian Song when they dropped from his corpse. There was a staff among those items as well, but it's not suited for you. Anyways, take this fire chaser set with you. As for the return scroll, don't use it just yet. I want you to stay here with me for a bit, Nie Yan replied. He and Tang Yao were brothers who had known each other since childhood. To put it simply, compared to their friendship, this fire chaser set didn't amount to much. Aha. All right. I guess I can't refuse. A hint of anticipation flashed through Tang Yao's eyes. After donning the fire chaser set, Tang Yao's outer appearance improved significantly. If he were to go out now, he would undoubtedly attract many women. What's your magic damage at now? Nie Yan asked. 50. To Tang Yao, this amount was something he couldn't even imagine reaching in the past. Not bad, you should be able to run some of the harder dungeons and quests with that much. Though it seems your current weapon is still a bit lacking. You should try and find yourself a better one when you return to town, Nie Yan suggested. Tang Yao receiving this fire chaser set for free so suddenly was tantamount to Nie Yan helping him reach the heavens with a single step. The path he would need to walk in the future had become a lot shorter. Tang Yao kept gazing at the current equipment he was wearing, seemingly unable to stop himself from admiring it. Let's stay here and train for a bit. There's a silver treasure chest up ahead and I want you to tag along and help me retrieve it. Here, I'll make the party. With how high Tang Yao's damage was now, killing rock spiders in this cave would be a piece of cake. There was a treasure chest just waiting to be opened. If he didn't retrieve whatever was inside today, then he wouldn't be able to sleep soundly at night. Silver chest, where? Tang Yao began burning with excitement. Up until now, he had only ever managed to find and open a single chest, not to mention, it was only a common white one. He had never even seen a silver chest before, let alone open one. Let's clear out those rock spiders back at that intersection first, Nie Yan replied. Now, with Tang Yao's assistance, there would be a lot less pressure on him when dealing with 2 rock spiders. 3 rock spiders might not even pose a challenge. After arriving at the intersection, Nie Yan took out his crossbow and loaded it. Then he took aim at a nearby spider and fired, sending 3 bolts flying out of the crossbow in quick succession. Bah, bah, bah. He ended up aggroing 2 rock spiders with his attack, the one that was hit and its companion in tow. Nie Yan positioned himself in the front while Tang Yao brandished his staff and released an arcane fireball and arcane blaze from the rear. Every spell he launched would deal over 30 or so damage. Occasionally, he would even score a critical hit, causing 2 50s to appear. They're 2 levels above me, yet I'm able to deal this kind of damage? Tang Yao exclaimed while seemingly in a daze. His own damage output had shocked him. Under the combined efforts of their attacks, the 2 spiders collapsed on the ground by the time Nie Yan's health had fallen to around 50%. Afterward, the 2 victors took the time to rest up. While Nie Yan sat down and recovered his health, Tang Yao took out some spring water and used it to replenish his mana. What's your experience at? Nie Yan asked as he stood up, his health having fully recovered. Level 3, 56%. How about you?
Tang Yao rip.
He had played for over a week to get to this level. Level 3, 9%. Leveling in conviction was extremely difficult. Each level required an insane amount of experience to level up. Considering that he had just started playing a few days ago, his leveling speed was fast enough to frighten someone. Not even 2 days had passed and he was already level 3. If word were to get out, it would definitely frighten many people. While they chatted, Nie Yan used his crossbow to lure out another 2 spiders and killed them. Repeating this tactic, the entire area was soon completely cleared of monsters. Nie Yan bent down and picked up an item that had dropped from the last rock spider. It was a charge skill book for warriors. The market price for a charge skill book should be around 20 some coppers right now. Indeed, The drop rate in a level 5 area is much higher compared to the low-level ones. What did it drop? A charge skill book. Tang Yao waved his hands and said, I'm pretty satisfied with just this fire chaser set, so you can take all the drops. Besides, I won't need to start looking for new equipment until I reach level 5. To Nie Yan, however, a single skill book wasn't of much value either. In the end, he didn't even try to argue with Tang Yao and threw the charge skill book into his knapsack. Since the two of them were in a party, they had to share the experience gained through combat. Thanks to Tang Yao's high damage, however, their pace had sped up significantly. Therefore they were gaining experience at a much faster rate than when they were by themselves, which made up for the fact that it was being shared. With the spiders all cleared out, Nie Yan walked over to where he had spotted the chest earlier. As he neared its location, he discovered many strange engravings and patterns etched into the top of the chest. These designs were extremely elaborate. In addition, there was a lock on this chest that kept it firmly sealed. Damn, I haven't learned lockpicking yet. Lockpicking was a skill that could only be learned after reaching level 5. Not to mention, the skill book that taught it was extremely expensive as well. And since this was a level 5 map, a locked chest appearing wouldn't be unexpected. Well, what are we going to do then? Tang Yao asked. This was the first time he had ever come across a silver chest, and it was going to end with this kind of outcome? Let's leave it for now and try to get to level 5 as quickly as possible. Who knows? By that time, that chest might still be here, Nie Yan helplessly replied. Just as Nie Yan and Tang Yao were preparing to leave and go back to training, a nearby boulder suddenly began trembling. What's that? Tang Yao asked after being startled. The trembling boulder was quite large, roughly twice the size of an ordinary rock spider, and had a hard and coarse surface. Had it not been trembling, it would have perfectly blended in with the numerous other boulders that were strewn about the area. Abruptly, 8 legs extended out of this boulder as it stood up. Once it was fully upright, it gradually opened its eyes, revealing 8 mossy green lights. Scritch. Scritch! It let out a shrill cry. The boulder was actually a rock spider. It's a leader-class rock spider. Nie Yan's heart tightened. He immediately entered stealth and made his way around it, positioning himself behind its back. Rock Spider, Elite Level 5. Health: 180/180. The spider glanced at its surroundings and quickly locked its gaze onto Tang Yao's position. Tang Yao looked back at the spider and saw his own image being reflected in its eyes. This, combined with the spider's sinister appearance, was especially terrifying to him. He immediately turned back and began to retreat. What are we gonna do? This is a level 5 leader-class rock spider.
Tang Yao never seen Edgerlim.
The strongest mob he'd ever encountered up until now was a measly level 3 leader class. Not to mention, this was his first time entering a level 5 area and unexpectedly, he had already come across such a powerful opponent. Kill it! Blast it with magic! Nie Yan answered back. It was far more dangerous to try and run instead of fighting it. They would definitely die while trying to escape. In addition, there was also the possibility of aggroing other spiders while on the run. As for escaping with a return scroll, it required 20 seconds to activate and would cancel upon being hit, which meant that it was out of the question as well. Under these circumstances, they were better off fighting it. Would the two of them even be able to kill a level 5 leader-class monster? Tang Yao was skeptical. Make sure you get far away from it, at least 20 meters. Then find a narrow tunnel and bunker down inside. Don't run too far in though, otherwise you might aggro some more spiders. Nie Yan warned. Tang Yao was still a novice and entrusting him with such a dangerous task would be difficult. In this situation, Nie Yan was perfectly safe and could escape at any time. As for Tang Yao, however, Nie Yan couldn't guarantee his survival if he were to fight. Thus, they could only resign themselves to fate. Scritch! Scritch! The rock spider furiously cried out as it charged towards Tang Yao. Oh! For F***'s sake! Tang Yao hurriedly sped up his pace. While running, he followed Nie Yan's advice and fired an arcane fireball at it. Bang! The fireball exploded when it crashed into the spider's body and dealt 18 damage, causing a damage value to float above its head. Its defense was absurd. Fire magic was supposed to deal bonus damage to rock spiders, but even so, the damage was still just too low. However, this was to be expected. It was a leader-class monster after all, so the damage was still alright. There's my chance. Nie Yan's eyes lit up as he struck the back of the rock spider with a smothering strike. The spider trembled and stopped in place. It's only going to be stunned 3 seconds. Normally, smothering strike would daze an enemy for 6 seconds, but this rock spider was a leader-class monster. It had a certain resistance to crowd control effects. Thus, Nie Yan's control skills were only half as effective against it. Regardless, these 3 seconds were still more than enough. Hit it! Don't just stand there and watch, Nie Yan shouted. Upon hearing Nie Yan, Tang Yao immediately cast Arcane Blaze. Boom. The fiery blaze exploded when it hit the spider's body. When the spider woke from its dazed state, Nie Yan took the initiative and struck out with Assassinate. After using his dagger to stab into its fleshy abdomen, he followed through with Lacerate and slashed outward. His attack opened up a gaping hole on the spider's underside where a thick green liquid began oozing out. Even though Nie Yan had begun attacking, the spider was still aggroed onto Tang Yao. After coming out of its dazed state, it continued its pursuit. Seeing this, Tang Yao rapidly retreated into a narrow passage. Bam. The spider's immense body rammed itself into the opening of the passage, but couldn't make it in. The surrounding walls trembled from this, causing several rocks to break from the ceiling and come crashing down to the ground. Scritch! Scritch! The spider cried out furiously as it tried to squeeze its massive body into the passage. Come and see how this elder will take care of you. After realizing the spider couldn't enter, Tang Yao suddenly became much more courageous. He brandished his staff and fired off an arcane missile, then followed up with an arcane fireball. Damn it! Arcane missile is only dealing half as much damage as an arcane fireball. The cooldown for arcane missile was very short because it was a regular spell. The casting time was quite short as well, requiring only a single second. Meanwhile, arcane fireball had a 10-second cooldown and required 3 seconds to cast. So it was impossible for him to continuously cast arcane fireball. As Tang Yao fired off spells, the rock spider continued to unceasingly ram itself into the entrance of the passageway, causing the walls on both sides to shake. Soon cracks began emerging in the walls, and the ceiling of the passageway gradually began to show signs of a possible collapse. Chapter 27, Meteor. Not only was Tang Yao the first one to attack the leader-class rock spider, but he was also the one putting out the most damage. It was because of this that the spider's aggro had been firmly placed on him. Meanwhile, the spider had completely ignored Nie Yan, who was attacking it with a combination of skills, leaving the latter behind as it continued pursuing Tang Yao. Nie Yan took advantage of the current situation and, while the spider was still distracted by Tang Yao, fished out the vial of poison within his knapsack and used it to coat his dagger. 5 seconds later, he finished applying the poison. He approached the spider from the rear and stabbed his dagger into its abdomen while using Vital Strike. Minus 10% defense. Minus 52. The rock spider became poisoned and a status debuff was applied. Additionally, Nie Yan's Vital Strike was a critical hit and dealt quite a bit of damage. Scritch! Scritch! The spider shrieked out in pain. It switched its focus to Nie Yan and pounced towards him. The spider's sudden change in targets caught Nie Yan off guard, forcing him to hastily fall back. Minus 78. Despite his attempts to flee, however, the rock spider's attack still managed to connect, draining the larger half of his health. Seeing his health bar quickly deplete, Nie Yan didn't dare to be careless. He immediately fished out a basic health potion and downed it, then rolled away and began retreating. The spider followed in pursuit. With the spider's attention elsewhere, Tang Yao was free to fire off a salvo of spells. He sent off Arcane Missile, Arcane Blaze and Arcane Fireball in quick succession. I'm going to be out of mana soon. Tang Yao glanced at his health and mana bars and found that he had roughly a quarter of his mana remaining. His mana expenditure was too ferocious. There was simply no chance his natural regeneration could keep up. Do you have any mana potions? Nie Yan asked. I have a basic mana potion. Then hurry up and drink it. We'll deal with it later, Nie Yan instructed. When he turned back to face the rock spider, he found that it had already neared his position. In response, he brandished his dagger and struck out with concussive blow, forcing the charging spider to abruptly halt its movements. Nie Yan took advantage of this and put some more space between himself and the spider. Even though the spider had been struck by concussive blow, it still managed to land an attack during the exchange. Nie Yan glanced at his health bar and found that roughly an eighth remained. Seeing this, he hurriedly used a combat bandage on himself. Plus 20. Plus 20. Plus 20. During all this, Tang Yao had fished out a bottle filled with a blue liquid from his knapsack and drank it. Drinking the potion actually gave him a slight heartache, not because of the potion itself, but because that single bottle of blue liquid was worth 10 coppers. To him, it was a life-saving treasure, one that he wouldn't use even in dire circumstances. Tang Yao's mana was instantly restored to 90%. With his mana now replenished, he unleashed several spells in succession. Each and every one of them exploded on contact, dealing a high amount of damage. Before 2 seconds had even passed, the rock spider woke from its dazed state. Upon waking, it immediately abandoned its attempt to pursue Nie Yan and instead rushed towards Tang Yao. Its aggro had shifted once again. "Keep at it! It's almost dead," Nie Yan shouted. Once his health was fully restored from the combat bandages, he rushed to the spider's side once again. The damage he and Tang Yao were dealing was by no means low. Even though their opponent was a level 5 leader class monster, it was still unable to withstand this kind of assault. By now, it only had a little over 10% of its health remaining. Scritch! Scritch! The spider cried out manically as its entire body suddenly turned a shade of crimson red. Not good! This son of AB*TCH became enraged. "Keep your distance and be careful of its attacks," Nie Yan nervously shouted. Even though Tang Yao still didn't understand what was going on, he followed Nie Yan's instructions regardless and began hastily retreating while continuing to cast spells. During his retreat, a spike jutted out from the ground below and pierced towards him. Fortunately, Tang Yao was still moving when this rock spike emerged, and as such, it only managed to barely graze him. However, this slight scratch still dealt 32 damage to his health. If this rock spike had hit Tang Yao directly, Nie Yan estimated that he would have lost at least 2/3 of his health. The attack nearly frightened Tang Yao to death, but the fact that he survived made him rejoice inside. "Keep running and don't stop. Oh, and make sure to avoid stepping on any areas where you see the ground trembling or cracking," Nie Yan shouted. If Tang Yao paused for even a moment, then he would meet his end. Sure enough, as soon as Nie Yan finished talking, more rock spikes began jutting out from the ground. Tang Yao listened to Nie Yan's advice and paid close attention to the earth beneath his feet, occasionally dodging from side to side. Even so, aside from the first rock spike, not a single one managed to hit him. Tang Yao couldn't help but wonder how Nie Yan discovered this method for dodging the rock spikes. Could it be that he had slain a leader-class rock spider in the past? In the end, he put this thought in the back of his mind and concentrated solely on evading the rock spikes erupting beneath his feet. He would occasionally see an opportunity to attack with a spell or two, but he never had the time to act. The spider seemed to become even more enraged as it watched attack after attack miss. It began to unceasingly ram itself into the tunnel walls in anger. Suddenly, crash! The walls finally crumbled and collapsed. The spider climbed over the pile of rubble and rushed inside the tunnel, pouncing towards Tang Yao. "Run quickly!" Nie Yan shouted. "I can't. There's another rock spider behind me. If I run any further, I'll end up aggroing it." Tang Yao nervously called out as he looked back at the spider's immense body which was fast approaching. Nie Yan looked at the spider's health bar. 5%. It only had a sliver of life left. "It's fine. Keep running," Nie Yan shouted as he checked his skill bar. By now, several of his skills had come off cooldown. He chased after the spider and arrived near its rear. Assassinate. Lacerate. -2, -3. It still has 2% remaining. Vital strike. Nie Yan lunged forward and pierced his dagger into the spider's abdomen. Scritch. Scritch! The spider let out a miserable shriek as it fell to the ground with a heavy crash. The impact made the entire cave tremble and shake. We finally killed it. Nie Yan finally relaxed as he breathed a sigh of relief. He walked over to the rock spider's corpse and picked up the loot. Hey, over here. I've still got one chasing me. Tang Yao ran over to Nie Yan with a smaller rock spider in tow him. When he was evading the leader-class rock spider just a moment ago, he was unable to avoid alerting one of the spiders in the area. Thankfully, it was only a common monster. Tang Yao ran behind Nie Yan and let the latter hold back the spider while he cast spells from the back. The two made short work of the spider, and it soon collapsed on the floor. My God! I'm going to die of exhaustion. Tang panted as he propped himself up against a nearby wall and began to slowly recover his health and mana. How they ever managed to kill this leader-class rock spider, which was 2 levels above them, was beyond him. Nonetheless, it was most likely his greatest achievement since starting the game. You know, I think I've just realized how awesome I actually am. Nie Yan took out the 2 items that the leader-class rock spider had dropped. A single skill book and a silver white key. Skill book. Meteor. Description. Beckon forth meteors to smite your enemies. Requirements. 1 syllable, 3 gestures, and 1 talisman. Properties. Beginner. Summon 5 meteors. Each meteor deals 5 bonus damage. 10 points of burn damage in a 5x5 meter area. Cooldown. 120 seconds. Restrictions. Elementalist. Arcane Mage. Can only be learned by the righteous faction that protects the light. This was an uncommon Arcane Mage skill book and an extremely rare one at that. At the beginner level, it could summon blazing fireballs that would rain down from the sky like meteors. Each fireball could strike 5 targets within a designated area simultaneously. At later levels, it would become a powerful area-wide spell. Even something like this can drop? You lucky son of AB*TCH. Nie Yan was almost speechless. The meteor skill was exceedingly rare, as it could only be found in level 1 to 30 areas where rum spiders, rock spiders, and flame spiders spawned. Moreover, it would only drop from leader class or higher versions of said monsters. What's worse was that the drop rate for this skill wasn't more than 1 in 10,000. With the current level of the majority of the player base, this skill would be priceless in the marketplace. They really did meet with unexpected success today. As for the rare drop, it was most likely due to killing a leader-class monster that was 2 levels higher than them. What did it drop? Tang Yao asked in surprise. Looks like your luck isn't half bad today. It dropped a meteor skill book. At the beginner level, it serves as an unparalleled area of effect skill, dealing high damage in a small area. At the later levels, it becomes a pretty decent mobbing skill. Nie Yan felt a slight hint of envy as he summarized the skill to Tang Yao. An arcane mage acquiring meteor during the first 2 weeks of the game. This truly was too much of a blessing. Really? Tang Yao suddenly stood up in surprise. Let me see. It's not bad. You can use it. But compared to Templar magic, giant magic, or dragon magic, it's still somewhat lacking. Nie Yan threw the meteor skill book over to Tang Yao and then looked at the other item that had dropped. Silver key. Used to open level 0 to 20 treasure chests that are silver or lower. Uses. 3/3. What's Templar magic and dragon magic? You'll find out in the future. For now just take this meteor skill book. I'll be taking the key, Nie Yan replied. He and Tang Yao would both be getting the items most useful for themselves. Nevertheless, the key was still better in Nie Yan's hands, because only he would be able to get the most value out of it. Not to mention that, with this key, he could now finally open that locked silver treasure chest. If that's the case, I won't be polite. Tang Yao went ahead and learned meteor. Afterwards, when he read the skill's description, he felt extremely satisfied. He had been thoroughly depressed due to being pursued by the Radiant Sacred Flame Guild all day. Who would have guessed that Nie Yan's arrival would have completely reversed his dire situation, turning all of his sorrows into joy in the process. Chapter 28. Silk Spinner Ring. Nie Yan walked over to the silver treasure chest and began unlocking it with the silver key. System. Opening treasure chest. Estimated completion. 20%. 50%. Click. The chest was unlocked. He glanced at the key, which now had its durability reduced from 3 to 2. Not bad. I can still use this 2 more times. Nie Yan threw the key into his knapsack and then started to feel around the inside of the chest. Eventually, he grasped an item. It was small, round, and felt smooth inside his hand. It's a ring. Nie Yan's surprise echoed in his thoughts as he fished out the item from the chest. The band had an ashy gray color, and he found it difficult to discern what material it was crafted from. Upon the setting attached to one side of the band sat an opaque white jewel adorned at the very center. Engraved on this opaque white jewel was the image of a spider. Despite its small size, the engraving was vivid and lifelike. It made it appear as though a jade-white spider truly did exist within this jewel. Silk spinner ring. Properties. Unidentified. It's a silk spinner ring.
Nie Yan gasped in surprise.
The silk spinner ring was a bronze-grade accessory that could only be found in areas where spider-type monsters spawned. Moreover, it was a ring that retained its usefulness all the way up to level 60. This was due to the ring's unique properties. It could shoot out a tough, resilient thread of spider silk that adhered to most surfaces and could extend up to 10 feet in length. In essence, it was the perfect treasure for scaling or jumping over obstacles such as rooftops, walls, ledges, or trees. What's a silk spinner ring? Tang Yao asked in bewilderment. Nie Yan faintly smiled and replied, just look at the craftsmanship. It should be at least a silver-grade accessory. Although the properties of this ring were yet to be appraised, he was able to discern the grade of equipment like this just by glancing at the name. Oh! So it was a silver-grade accessory? No wonder you were so excited. Tang Yao replied as he came to a sudden realization. From Nie Yan's perspective, this silk spinner ring was much more valuable than the meteor skill book. This was because this ring would make him significantly more versatile, therefore he would have plenty more options to consider when working towards a specific goal. In his heart, he couldn't help but think, now if only I can get a hold of that jewel from the Trey-Ant King, then everything will be perfect. A friend of mine invited me to run the Trey-Ant Forest with her tomorrow, and there's still a few open spots. Do you want to join? Sure, but would they even agree to have me? Tang Yao asked in a somewhat anxious tone. He and his friends had wanted to form a team and run a dungeon in the past. However, not a single team wanted them or agreed to let them join. No worries. You have me with you after all. Besides, your magic damage is 50 now. Such a high damage arcane mage. Even if they wanted to find one, they wouldn't be able to. Have some confidence in yourself. You're my brother after all. Nie Yan smiled and patted Tang Yao on the shoulder. Understood. If you have any more advice to give, then please let me know now. Whatever you tell me, I'll practice it. I don't believe there's anything I can't learn. Listening to these words, Tang Yao was in high spirits and felt touched by Nie Yan's words. Well, I've already told you all that you need to know in regards to improving your skills. The most crucial aspect now is whether you've practiced enough or not. As long as you practice, improve your reaction time, and put in the effort to avoid making any large mistakes, you'll have nothing to worry about. Try finding people to duel with early in the day to improve your skills. When you get to level 5, I'll find some people and we'll form a team to run Secret Cavern. There I'll help you grab the Arcane Mage's Exile Disciple set. I'll have you so satisfied, you'll explode from happiness, Nie Yan said. With him here, it would be difficult for Tang Yao not to become an expert even if he didn't want to. Really? Then it won't do if I don't make an effort. Tang Yao was now full of motivation. In the past, he felt it didn't matter how much he practiced his skills because in the end, he would never catch up to the people who were considered elites. However now, after listening to Nie Yan's words, he felt a bright future lay ahead of him. Afterward, Nie Yan gave Yao Yao a call through voice chat. What do you want? Yao Yao asked in an annoyed tone. In truth, she was no longer angry at Nie Yan. When she answered the call, however, she pretended to still be angry with him. Do you still have any extra spaces for Trey-Ant Forest tomorrow?
Nie Yan smiled helplessly.
2 more open spaces. I have a friend who I want to bring along. Are you guys willing to take him? What level is your friend? He's not joining just to leech experience, is he? 'Cause if he is, I'll have to ask my senior sister first. Also, what class does this friend of yours play? Yao Yao answered in an abrasive tone. Arcane Mage. Oh. What's his magic damage? Over 50. To be more accurate, it's 52. His damage is that high. Yao Yao exclaimed in surprise. Her magic damage as a holy mage was only at 37A number, which was considered to be quite high among others at the same level. She never expected that Nie Yan's friend would possess more magic damage than her, and by such a large margin at that. Hold on, I'll go ask my senior sister. She'll most likely agree to it. For an arcane mage to possess such high magic damage, they definitely must have cleared many dungeons in the past. These people were top experts. Even if their team found one and begged them to join, they still might not necessarily agree to join. And now, one of these experts had been delivered right to their doorstep. Her senior sister would have absolutely no reason to refuse. Normally it would be quite the opposite, with Tang Yao being the one doing the refusing or accepting. Alright, go and ask. I'll be waiting for your reply. A few moments later, she sent a reply. I've asked big sister Yulan. She agreed to let your friend join, so bring him with you when you come tomorrow morning. Alright. Nie Yan nodded his head and hung up the call. Dude. Hello. Yao Yao still wanted to ask Nie Yan why his friend would even want to join them. From their perspective, this kind of expert wasn't easy to find, and they definitely weren't someone who would casually join up with a team like theirs. However, Nie Yan had already hung up on her. The only noise she heard from the call now was the busy signal that signified that the call had ended, which ended up infuriating her to no end as she madly stamped her feet on the ground. Hanging up on me so quickly. Now that you've got an expert by your side, you suddenly think you're too good for me. Is that how it is? How infuriating. So, how'd it go? Are they willing to let me join? Tang Yao asked in an anxious tone as he fiddled with his hands. Up until now, Tang Yao had always been someone who would join pickup groups. Occasionally he would join a group and run some common instances with them. However, he had never formed a regular party or team. The teams that were able to run level 3 or higher instances also tended to be ones with a significant influence among the player base. Not to mention, these teams usually had fixed members. In almost all cases, there was simply no chance for an ordinary player to join. This was because if a team were to accept a weak player, that player would only hold the team back. This was why teams had harsh requirements and were particularly picky when recruiting new members. However, as long as a player met their requirements and joined their ranks, then they would easily become a part of the team. Such recruits would be called upon to join the ranks whenever the team was lacking in members. Hence why Tang Yao waited with heated expectation when Nie Yan had hung up the call. As a person who had also been unable to enter an elite team in the past, Nie Yan understood his feelings well. Tang Yao's eagerness and anticipation made Nie Yan reminisce about when he had first entered a team in the past. His feelings had been about the same back then as well. They agreed. All you need to do is tag along with me tomorrow and you'll be fine. Your stats alone would make any team eager to have you, so relax. After all, playing an arcane mage requires a significant amount of skill. That's great.
Tang Yao accidentally Edgar Lim.
Tomorrow was going to be his first time running a high-level instance like the Treyant Forest. This was an opportunity he had been yearning for even in his dreams. Are there any requirements to this instance? For this instance, there are no specific requirements for arcane mages. Just make sure not to draw any aggro and you'll be fine. By the way, Treyants have a fairly low resistance against fire magic, so who knows? Maybe you'll have done the most damage by the end of tomorrow. Nie Yan said while smiling. Meanwhile, Tang Yao was taking this matter seriously. When he recalled his first time running an instance, he didn't fare any better. Did you bring any talismans with you? I've got 5. Let's have a look at Meteor then. Cast the spell for me before we leave here in a bit. Where am I going to cast it? The surrounding area only had 1 or 2 rock spiders at most. Using the skill here would be too much of a waste. I'll gather them up, so just get ready, Nie Yan replied as he ran off deeper into the cave. Okay. Tang Yao fished out a talisman from his bag. He was filled with anticipation and was quite eager to find out just how powerful his new spell was. Nie Yan continued running deeper into the cave. Whenever he encountered a rock spider, he would attack it once and, instead of tangling with it any further, continue on his way. After these spiders were attacked, they would chase after him. The number of spiders chasing him steadily increased until they began slowing down due to the crowding. Nie Yan was quite nimble as he moved back and forth through the cave. The mass of 20+ rock spiders following behind him as they cried out made him resemble a train. Tang Yao was busy tidying up his knapsack when he heard the sound of activity coming from deeper within the cave. When he walked over to take a look, he discovered a deluge of 20+ spiders surging through the passage. They appeared as though they were going to swallow up everything in their path. Oh, my God! How did you manage to aggro so many of them? Tang Yao cried out in alarm as he turned around and began running for dear life. Chapter 29. Book of Order. Stop dawdling. Hurry up and cast Meteor already. Nie Yan pestered through voice chat. Meteor takes 10 seconds to cast. By the time I finish casting, it'll already be too late.
Tang Yao ansioli riplit.
He estimated he would be overrun by spiders before he could even finish casting the spell. I don't care, just start casting.
Smon, Uriup.
Tang Yao clenched his teeth and unraveled the talisman. After brandishing his staff, he began casting Meteor. Soon, large amounts of fire essence from the surrounding area began converging at his location. As the fire essence gathered, the sheer heat from the scorching blaze caused the temperature in the surrounding air to rise. Tang Yao watched as Nie Yan led the 20+ rock spiders through the passageway and into the cave intersection. As spiders surged into the intersection like a massive wave, Nie Yan ran into the narrow passage where Tang Yao had retreated. The passage was so narrow that only a single spider managed to squeeze itself through, but in doing so, it blocked off access to the passage for the rest of the spiders behind itself. Concussive blow! Nie Yan turned around and struck the leading spider in the head, causing it to enter a dazed state and stop the movements of the spiders behind itself. 8 seconds. 7 seconds. 6 seconds. 5 seconds. As time slowly ticked by, the fire essence which was steadily gathering around Tang Yao became increasingly intense. For the most part, the spells that required a set of syllables to cast were also the ones that had a relatively large area of effect. From Nie Yan's knowledge and experience, Meteor was the only area of effect spell that elementalists and arcane mages could learn at level 0, and it was quite efficient at killing many monsters. However, even if you were to gather up 1,000 elementalists and arcane mages, you still might not necessarily find one that possessed Meteor. After 3 seconds passed, the spider woke from its dazed state and immediately pounced towards Nie Yan. In reaction, Nie Yan raised his dagger and began skirmishing with the rock spider. He kept the spider firmly in place and prevented any of its attacks from reaching Tang Yao, so as to avoid interrupting the spell. 10 seconds, whether this moment was long or short, depended on one's perspective. The truth of the matter, however, was that the moment would simply be over once you counted from 1 to 10. While in a trance-like state, Tang Yao raised his staff and chanted lines of strange syllables that even he didn't know the meaning of. When he finished casting, an enormous fireball fell from above. Boom! A deafening explosion echoed out as the fireball crashed into the group of spiders. The fireball resembled a heavenly maiden upon impact, scattering fiery blossoms in every direction. These blazing flowers didn't immediately extinguish upon landing on the ground. Instead, they continued to burn, dealing a fixed amount of damage every second to the spiders that were caught in the explosion. Scritch! Scritch! The 20+ spiders caught in the explosion were in a state of upheaval as they cried out in agony. No matter what kind of state they were in, however, they were still unable to attack Nie Yan and Tang Yao. So, he had already calculated everything. No wonder he dared to aggro so many monsters at once. Nie Yan and Tang Yao were only able to kill monsters like this by taking advantage of the unique topography of this intersection. Attempting to use this tactic and unleash a fireball upon a large group of enemies would have been suicidal if they were out in an open field. Normally, the destruction caused by meteor would be extremely limited in narrow spaces such as this. As it turned out, however, the intersection within the cave was quite suitable for casting the spell. Tang Yao couldn't help but admire Nie Yan even more. For him to be able to think of a tactic like this. A second later, another fireball rained down from above and exploded after hitting the ground. The brilliant flames expanded into the surroundings upon impact. 3 more enormous fireballs subsequently rained from the sky. Of the spiders that had been hit by meteor, 6 were directly crushed, 16 burned to the death from continuous area of effect burn damage, and the remaining were all dying or near death. The destructive capabilities of meteor had been clearly displayed before their very eyes. Tang Yao gazed blankly at the pile of rock spider corpses that laid before him. He had single-handedly caused all this destruction, a realization which hard for him to conceive. Nie Yan, did I really do all this? Tang Yao asked foolishly. Only after looking at the enormous amount of experience did he finally come to accept it. Just a moment ago, he really was the caster of that formidable meteor spell. What VE you got that blank look for? Come on, let's take care of the remaining spiders, Nie Yan smiled and said. I'm out of mana. Tang Yao gazed at his mana bar that was almost completely bereft of any color. He still had enough to cast a few arcane missiles, but he wouldn't be able to cast anything like Flame Explosion. After hearing Tang Yao's words, Nie Yan recalled something. Meteor was a spell that voraciously consumed mana. That fact that Tang Yao was able to cast it was already quite impressive. Not to mention, he even had a little bit of mana left over to cast other spells. Besides the mana consumption, meteor also required talismans which weren't cheap either. Therefore, if he was to continue casting the spell while grinding monsters, then Tang Yao would find his funds being quickly eaten away. Nie Yan pounced towards one of the remaining rock spiders and used Vital Strike to kill it. Following this, he and Tang Yao quickly began cleaning up the remaining spiders. Soon, every single of one of those 20+ spiders had met their end and collapsed on the floor. Nie Yan walked over to the corpses and gathered up the loot, which amounted to a total of 3 coppers. In the end, not a single piece of equipment had dropped. Nie Yan glanced at his experience bar. It had risen by another 3% after killing so many rock spiders. We've cleared out all the monsters in this area. Let's head deeper in, Nie Yan suggested. Mob grinding in such a manner could only be experienced every once in a while, as the monsters wouldn't respawn fast enough to make it a viable tactic. What? Why are we going even further in? Tang Yao asked in a surprised manner. There's something I must do deeper in the cave. Besides, the scenery inside this cave is quite mystical, Nie Yan replied as he smiled mysteriously. Upon arriving inside this cave, Nie Yan had vaguely remembered something unique about it. There was a spring at the very end of the rock spider cave. Not only was the water in this spring quite deep, but it also contained many strong currents which weaved and intersected with one another underneath the surface. As for why these currents existed, it was because the spring connected to an underground lake. After passing through the lake, you would find yourself arriving at a secluded ravine where all kinds of exotic medicinal herbs grew in large abundance. However, there was something even more valuable inside this ravine. Something which countless players could only yearn for in their dreams. A torn page from the Book of Order. In the game's lore, the Book of Order and Book of Chaos were both divine objects which had been handed down since the era of shared governance, 873-1235. Even after 500 or 600 years had passed, the legend of these 2 books continued to spread. Their emergence was a mystery, as well as the origins of their author. Order and Chaos represented the laws of the world. Each of the 2 books contained 6 volumes, 36 chapters total. These books represented 2 distinct and opposing powers which were scattered across the world. Legend has it that if one were to gather every page and complete the Book of Order, they would be able to revive the God of Order and gain immense power. Moreover, the owner of the Book of Order would become the supreme pontiff of the righteous faction and control all the holy shrines in the continent. On the opposite side of the spectrum, if one were to complete the Book of Chaos, they would gain immense destructive power and become the ruler of darkness, arch-nemesis of the owner of the Book of Order. The Book of Order and the Book of Chaos were both legendary existences. When the first six-chapter volume emerged, a cinematic played showing the long history of the Viridian Empire and Citrine Empire. The 6 chapters from the first volume of the Book of Order were as follows: the chapter of justice, the chapter of virtue, the chapter of courage, the chapter of wisdom, the chapter of harmony, and the chapter of freedom. These 6 chapters fell in the hands of 6 people, each of whom were experts that possessed a seat as one of the top 100 members in the righteous faction. The owners of the chapter of justice, the chapter of courage, and the chapter of wisdom were respectively the first seat, the third seat, and the 6th seat. As such, the correlation between the two caused these chapters from the Book of Order to be viewed as divine existences by the public. It was correct that each of these chapters from the Book of Order possessed a powerful strength, but the caveat was that they could not be stored in a player's personal storage. Thus, the player would be forced to carry them on person. When the owner of a chapter was killed by another player, the chapter would always drop, unless the player possessed all 6 chapters. Due to this, the fighting and killing instigated by the Book of Order was almost never-ending. The chapter of justice, chapter of courage, and chapter of wisdom eventually fell into the hands of the leaders of 3 superguilds. The owners of the remaining chapters also gained formidable power, but they had to always keep a low profile whenever they set out. They would also try to avoid using their chapter's powers in the presence of other players. Even so, Nie Yan had still witnessed the powerful might of these chapters from the Book of Order in videos before. The holder of the chapter of justice was the president of Angel Corp, a demon hunter from the elf race Tianxia. He once confronted and defeated over 100 hostile enemies by summoning 16 righteous knights. One person had defeated over 100 players. This event later became a legend. The holder of the chapter of wisdom was Holy Judgment's guild leader, a holy mage emperor killer. He had withstood the invasion of the undead, during which he used the forbidden magic Resplendent Brilliance and eliminated 300 liches, thus creating another legend. The holder of the chapter of courage was the guild leader of the Holy Empire Guild, a berserker Sleepy Fox. During a guild war, he rushed deep into the enemy ranks all by himself, killing an enemy every few steps and personally beheading over 200 of them. He had slaughtered everything before him. Nie Yan couldn't help but burn with excitement when he thought of this. Chapter 30. Search for the Chapter of Courage. The Book of Order truly was an item of immense temptation. And now, in his new life, Nie Yan had the chance to gather all 6 chapters of the first volume. There was only one problem: he didn't know if he could. Nie Yan knew the whereabouts of the 6 chapters in the first volume quite clearly. As for the other 30 chapters that were scattered across the world, he roughly knew most of their locations. The one he was currently searching for was the 3rd chapter of the Book of Order, the Chapter of Courage. What are we going to do when we get further in? Just follow me to the end of the cave. After that you can head back and continue training. The place I'm planning to go to is somewhere you're not capable of reaching, Nie Yan replied. His destination would be somewhat difficult to reach even for a thief like himself. Thus, there was no need to consider an arcane mage like Tang Yao. Is it dangerous? Tang Yao curiously asked. Yes, very. Nie Yan nodded and replied. If it's that dangerous, then why do you want to go there? Tang Yao asked while deep in confusion. There's a certain item there I want to retrieve. Nie Yan laughed as he responded. The game had just recently come out, and players like Tang Yao wouldn't know just how alluring a single chapter from the Book of Order was. I see. Tang Yao slowly nodded his head. He still didn't understand why Nie Yan wanted to go despite being aware of the danger. However, it seemed Nie Yan already had a plan, so he didn't inquire any further. After finishing their conversation, the two headed deeper into the cave. The passages were extremely narrow, which massively reduced Meteor's effectiveness. As a result, the two had to resort to using ordinary methods to clear the way as they slowly advanced. Rock spiders fell one after another. Under Nie Yan's guidance, Tang Yao felt his skills improve significantly. You're making rapid progress. Keep practicing like this and you'll find yourself becoming an expert in no time. Oh yeah, since we'll be heading to a dungeon tomorrow, let me give you a rundown on a few of the basics. The key aspects are aggro management and positioning. The dungeon we're running tomorrow is going to be a bit difficult, So it's best that you take caution, especially since we're dealing with the Treant King, Nie Yan said while facing Tang Yao. He went on and passed down all his knowledge regarding arcane mages and dungeoneering to Tang Yao. From time to time, he would also explain a few of the key parts of Treant Forest. Tang Yao keenly listened to every word he said. Before meeting Nie Yan, he could have been considered an average player. Neither his skills nor his equipment would have been considered anything special. In the end, he could only continue lagging behind others in the lower levels. But right now he was wearing the Fire Chaser set, which meant that his equipment was among the very best. Not only did this great success make him feel self-conscious, but it also put an immense pressure on him. In order to live up to his own expectations, Tang Yao began to work as hard as an actual expert would. In truth, Tang Yao's aptitude was pretty decent. Though it couldn't be considered at the apex, he would still be considered quite skilled. After receiving Nie Yan's pointers, however, he completely transformed. Even if he wasn't regarded as an expert, in respect to his skills, it was evident that he knew how to improve. What else do I have to take note of? The most important stats for an arcane mage are intelligence, awareness, and focus. Among these three, intelligence is the primary stat and undoubtedly the most important. Now this leaves the remaining two, awareness and focus, which are auxiliary stats. Awareness improves your survivability when confronting enemies that are able to stealth, whereas focus makes it harder for your spells to be interrupted. Hence these two stats are extremely important as well. You can't improve auxiliary stats by leveling up, thus you must rely on passive skills to improve them. So if you want to keep up with others, make sure to possess the relevant passive skills. By the way, if you see any suitable skill books in the future and want to buy them but lack the money, let me know. I'll help you pay for them, Nie Yan said. Money isn't something I'm lacking, so you don't have to do that. I'll just need to hang around the auction house some more in the future, that's all, Tang Yao said as he shook his head. He took all of Nie Yan's advice to heart. As the pair neared the end of the cave, the faint sound of running water could be heard. Well, now that we've reached our destination, you should head back. There are 3 leader-class rock spiders up ahead, and I'm afraid you won't be able to make it past them, Nie Yan suggested. In his past life, he had seen a video online about how the chapter of courage was found. From this video, he had completely memorized the path to the chapter. I see. Well, you be careful then. Nie Yan nodded his head. I'll call you before heading over to the dungeon tomorrow, so go train and level for now. I'll be leaving then. Tang Yao took out the return scroll, unraveled it and read it out loud. After 20 seconds, he became a streak of white light and teleported away. Nie Yan watched as Tang Yao was spirited away, then headed further into the cave. Originally, he had planned to wait until his level was higher before retrieving any chapters from the Book of Order. At his current level, retrieving the chapter of courage would be quite troublesome. Since he was already here, however, he decided that he might as well try it out. After all, if he was successful in obtaining the chapter of courage, then it would certainly make it much easier for him to level in the future. Nie Yan traveled deeper into the cave, where the secret area was located, and hid among the shadows. After walking for 3 minutes, he found himself in an open space. Off in the distance, he could see 3 giant leader-class rock spiders patrolling the area. Even further back, beyond the rock spiders, he could see an area entirely composed of water roughly around 200 square meters. The water circulated from a narrow channel which eventually led underground. This was the source of running water that he had heard from before. 3 leader-class rock spiders blocked his path to the pond. They frequently moved about in the open space, only stopping in place to scratch their heads with their legs every once in a while. Nie Yan carefully observed them. He estimated that roughly 10 meters lied between him and the water's edge. For non-thief classes, it was absolutely impossible to pass through this area without alerting the leader-class rock spiders. Other classes would have to resort to killing them if they wanted to make it through the area. I guess there's no choice but to go in regardless. Nie Yan understood the risky nature of such a tactic, but he had overcome situations that were several times more dangerous than this one before. The most alluring characteristic of the thief class was the sheer excitement it provided. Thieves did what no other classes dared to do, and in doing so, they experienced the feeling of dancing between life and death. Perhaps his own nature was one that welcomed risks and dangers. What mattered most was that Nie Yan enjoyed this feeling. He strived to achieve the impossible and overcome dangerous situations one after another because it was proof of his own ability. After some quick calculations, he estimated that 2.5 meters was the closest he could get to one of the spiders without alerting it. As long as I'm not within 2.5 meters, I should be safe. Nie Yan entered stealth and began making his way forward. The 3 leader-class rock spiders continued to move about the area, their large eyes constantly reflecting images of their surroundings. Within the area, not a single thing was overlooked under their vigilant watch. In his past life, a player once calculated the statistics of the various types of monsters. They discovered that among animal-type monsters, spider types were ranked number 7 when it came to awareness. To put this into perspective, the number of animal-type monsters in the game amounted to approximately 6,000. This alone proved just how high the awareness of spiders was. Nie Yan carefully maintained the distance between himself and the leader-class rock spiders. He gradually moved towards the water's edge while simultaneously controlling his breathing. Using clock position, the locations of all 3 spiders were respectively 3.5 meters at 9 o'clock, 5 meters at 12 o'clock, and 6 meters at 11 o'clock. His body resembled a gecko as he stuck himself to the cave wall and gradually shuffled his way forward. Every action was made with meticulous care. From the loose stones near the cave wall to the scattered gravel underneath his feet, they were all variables that he had to take into consideration. Caution was a ship that sailed for 10,000 years. Nie Yan felt he could never be too careful. The 6 years of experience he had gained in his past life granted him a deep understanding of this kind of reasoning. It was something he truly learned only after experiencing countless bitter lessons. In total, he had died over 300 times outside of instances. Needless to say, the times he died while in them was even more. An expert who had never experienced death was never an expert to begin with. If one wanted to be looked upon as an expert, then it was absolutely essential to take risks and gain experience in PvP. It was because experience could only be gained in such dangerous situations that death was unavoidable. In the eyes of an expert, players who had never experienced death or only grinded monsters to reach level 100 were still considered beginners. It was truly only because of his numerous experiences with death that Nie Yan became a somewhat well-known great thief, and was only a hair's breadth away from obtaining the title of Shadow Dancer. The difference between Shadow Dancer and an average thief was only a single title. At that time, however, only 6 other people within the entire Atlantic continent held the title of Shadow Dancer. Chapter 31: Assassin's Decree. As Nie Yan moved forward, he gradually came within roughly 3 meters of one of the nearby leader-class rock spiders. The spider suddenly trembled and turned its gaze towards Nie Yan's location. Fortunately, Nie Yan was completely immersed within the darkness of the cave. The shadows here provided him an excellent environment to conceal himself. Even so, the rock spider's gaze was so intense that it actually appeared to be capable of piercing through the darkness. The tenseness in his heart reached an extreme as he held his breath and stuck as close to the cave wall as possible. The spider trembled as it saw a distinct silhouette gradually come into view. Scritch. Scritch! It let out a cry and rushed towards its newfound opponent. Damn it, I've been discovered. Nie Yan's heart sank as he activated a speed scroll and sped towards the spring as fast he could. In that same moment, the 2 other spiders also took action and attempted to flank Nie Yan. They blocked off his path while the previous spider attempted to ram him. Nie Yan bent his knees to their limit and then leapt out of the way of the attacking spider. His character's weight load was currently light, thus he had a maximum jumping distance of 3 meters and jump height of half a meter. In a flash, he leapt out of the rock spider's attack range. Boom! The spider's immense body rammed into the wall. The impact fractured the wall, sending rubble falling to the ground. Meanwhile, the other 2 spiders simultaneously pounced at him from the front and left flank. However, Nie Yan's senses were sharp. He quickly went into a roll after landing, avoiding the oncoming charge of both spiders. Bang! The 2 spiders collided with each other, and as a result, they flipped over and sprawled out on their backs. The 3 leader-class rock spiders had nearly blocked off all paths of escape with their massive bodies alone. Nie Yan successfully escaped their encirclement by passing through a small gap between the 3 spiders, after which he continued running forward. Upon reaching the 5-meter mark, he increased his pace even more as he bolted towards the spring. One of the spiders managed to recover faster than the others and pounced towards Nie Yan. Seeing this, Nie Yan leaped into the air, and with a splash, dove head first into the spring. The 3 rock spiders hovered around when they arrived at the water's edge. However, in the end, none of them dared to enter. It was yet another narrow escape. As Nie Yan dove deeper, he activated the Water Aversion Pearl's ability. There was even less light underwater, which meant that his view distance was extremely limited. Meanwhile, the underlying currents posed a huge challenge as they pushed him every which way, making it more difficult to swim. At times they would even forcefully push or pull him away from his destination. Nie Yan stabilized himself and carefully observed his surroundings. After reclaiming his bearings, he swam forth once more. There shouldn't be any monsters here, Nie Yan thought to himself. He swam for another 10 minutes before seeing gentle pillars of light shine down through the waters above him. I remember this place. There's a treasure chest near this location, Nie Yan thought as he swam through the dark waters at the bottom of the lake. In his previous life, every inch of this area had been thoroughly searched by others. Even the hidden nooks and crannies weren't exempt from this search. It was because of this that Nie Yan knew there was someone who had found a treasure chest in this location before. Aside from the water far above, the surrounding region was pitch black. Therefore, Nie Yan could only rely on his sense of touch as he navigated through the area. He felt a slight pain as his feet hit the ground and he came into contact with several protruding rocks. He had reached the lakebed. Ignoring the pain, Nie Yan continued to fumble his way through the rocks on the lakebed. He reached his hands into the soft, delicate sand below and searched around. His hands soon came into contact with an object seemingly hidden underneath the lakebed. Immediately, he began digging his way through layers upon layers of sand until a faint golden shimmer entered his eyes, causing his pupils to sharply contract. I struck it rich. It's a gold treasure chest. The golden treasure chest emitted a brilliant luster within the darkness of the lakebed. Every inch of its surface was covered with delicate carvings. Although these engravings seemed somewhat worn and aged, it didn't affect the overall aesthetic of the chest. On the contrary, it gave off the appeal of an artifact with historical value. What was even more remarkable was a certain symbol on the chest that caught Nie Yan's eye, a delicate engraving of a wolf. The engraving was roughly the size of an adult's fist. When Nie Yan looked closely, he could even make out each individual hair on this extremely detailed engraving. Both equipment and objects within the Atlantic continent were filled with a strong historical value from all eras. Each and every sculpture, painting, handiwork, and weapon carry the historical characteristics of their respective era. Therefore, no matter what the decade, century, or era, there would always be relevant research on that certain time period. With 10 full years of experience with this game, Nie Yan had a meticulous understanding of the history behind these engravings, paintings, and so on. This particular engraving was the symbol of an infamous pirate group that roamed the Sindh Sea region during the era of shared governance, 873-1235. They were an endless headache for the Republic until their legislative body finally decided to act. The Republic dispatched their most elite naval forces to exterminate the pirates. The Allied Navy formed by the coalition of humans, giants, elves, and beast men forced these pirates to flee for their lives. In the end, these pirates were eventually defeated. However, rumors have it that, before the war between the pirates and the Republic broke out, the pirates hid their treasures and scattered them in various locations throughout the continent. In response, the Republic decreed that ownership of the lost treasures would go to whomever finds them. As a result, countless treasure hunting groups were formed in hopes of finding lost treasure. Indeed, many of these lost treasures ended up being found during this time period. However, many remained hidden, lost within the Atlantic continent for centuries. This golden chest was one such relic left behind from the era of shared governance. The historical value of this ancient chest alone would make historians lose their minds. Nie Yan only knew that someone from his past life had found a chest in this area. He thought that the treasure chest would just be an ordinary one. Never did he expect that it was actually a golden treasure chest left behind from the era of shared governance. Whoever found the chest must have meticulously and deliberately hid the chest's rank because of this. Nie Yan opened the chest and reached inside. After feeling around for a bit, he grabbed onto what appeared to be a dagger. When he felt the dagger in his palm, Nie Yan couldn't suppress the fierce excitement within his heart. He hastily took the dagger out from the chest and gazed at its properties. Assassin's Decree, Dagger. Properties. Unidentified. As the dagger needed to be appraised, he couldn't tell what its properties were yet. However, despite having been worn down after sitting here for centuries, the cold glint reflecting off the blade's edge showed that it was still sharp. This dagger had a unique design, vastly different from a common dagger. The handle was embroidered with various multicolored jewels, which made it look extremely beautiful. There was also a blood groove on the flat side of the blade, which made the dagger look streamlined and sleek. The tip was not unlike a barb with the blade curving inwards. This dagger looked like it could easily cut through flesh. Assassin's Decree. Nie Yan tried to recall of any information related to this dagger, but nothing surfaced. He had never come across this dagger before, and thus he was unable to guess its properties. Despite this, he was still able to discern from the design of the dagger alone that it was at least a gold-grade piece of equipment. Nie Yan understood just how significant owning a gold-grade piece of equipment this early in the game's existence would be. He would have many opportunities in the future which wouldn't have presented themselves had he not obtained this dagger. Knowing this, Nie Yan was filled with endless excitement as he stored the dagger into his knapsack. Even if he failed to retrieve the chapter of courage this time, this dagger alone would have made the trip worthwhile. According to how the game was designed, it was highly unlikely that two chests of the same quality would appear in the same area. The chances for such a situation to occur were slim to none. Thus Nie Yan didn't bother searching the lakebed anymore and instead began swimming up towards the surface where rays of light gently shone down into the water. As he neared the surface, the light became increasingly intense. Splash. When Nie Yan's head broke through the surface of the water, he found himself in an extremely small spring. He surveyed his surroundings and discovered a beautiful valley. The clear spring he found himself in flowed down the valley gulch and into a flourishing forest below. An abundance of grass grew freely in the rest of the valley, resembling a thick green carpet which covered everything aside from the forest itself. Various kinds of wild flowers were littered across the area. These flowers gave off a delicate fragrance which wafted throughout the region. Surrounding the valley were steep green mountains that acted as a natural barrier from the outside world. These mountains were home to a diverse range of vegetation, which meant this area was most likely sealed off from the rest of the world. A short while later, Nie Yan was now walking through the deeper parts of the forest below. The dense foliage blocked off most of the sunlight from above, however. Some light still managed to pass through the tender green leaves and shine down upon the earth below. It was because of this that the forest was not dark, but instead tinted a shade of viridian which gave off a mysterious yet warming sensation. As Nie Yan walked through the forest, the surroundings made it seem as though he had entered a completely different world. Chapter 32. The third chapter of the Book of Order. Nie Yan swept his gaze over every nook and cranny in the forest. When he spotted a certain shrub at the base of the mountain, he was incapable of looking away. This particular shrub reached up to his knees and had many branches. Its appearance was not unlike a jade sculpture, pure, translucent, and radiating with vibrant colors. Tucked away within the shrub's leaves was a single scarlet-red fruit that resembled a cherry, tender and glistening. This is a red ernberry. I didn't think a plant like this could appear in such a low-level area. Nie Yan's memories were still quite clear. During the latter years of his past life, the selling price of a single red ernberry reached up to several hundred gold. Moreover, each and every red ernberry held different properties. Nie Yan walked towards the steep mountain wall and carefully harvested the red ernberry from the shrub. Fortunately, he had already learned the gatherer's skill. Otherwise he would have had no chance in retrieving this fruit, an event which would have been truly unfortunate. Red ernberry, rare fruit. Description: the player who eats this fruit will gain +2 willpower permanently. Restrictions: each player may only consume this fruit up to 3 times. Further consumption will not yield any additional benefits. Considering the red ernberry's inherent rarity, and the fact that it could also permanently increase a player's stats, it was no wonder this fruit could sell for upwards of several hundred gold. Nie Yan contemplated for a while before finally deciding to eat the fruit. After all, This was a rare opportunity. Besides, this fruit was meant to be eaten. Only a fool would actually sell it. An additional 2 willpower was quite decent. Willpower was a stat that reduced the effectiveness of debuffs, such as sickness, poison, curses, resistance debuffs, etc., on a player. It didn't matter if it was PvP or PvE. Willpower was a stat that would always be useful. After all, the number of mobs and classes that could cast debuffs on a player were more than just a few. Nie Yan put the fruit into his mouth. It melted almost instantaneously and became a warm current that flowed directly to his stomach. He took a quick glance at his willpower stat. It had gone from 0 to 2. Having 2 willpower at such a low level was rather useful. After eating the red urnberry, he didn't dally any further and headed deeper into the forest. After walking down a path hidden in the grass for roughly 5 minutes, he finally entered the deeper part of the forest. Here the trees were more lush and exuberant, but the lighting was much dimmer due to the light having to penetrate through much more vegetation to reach the ground below. The forest floor was covered in a layer of dead leaves that stretched as far as the eye could see. Within the dark forest, a single bright ray of light could be seen shining through the dense foliage. The absence of any other lights only served to make it all the more prominent and clear. At the center of the ray of light was a meter-high cylindrical column that seemed to have been carved out of stone. Placed atop this column was a thick book which seemed to have been eroded by the elements. Its worn state seemed to be a testament to the book's long and distant history. This book was, according to Nie Yan's memories, aptly named Annal of the Era of Shared Governance. Its contents detailed all of the historical events that occurred during the era of shared governance. It was within this thick history book that the chapter of courage was hidden. Nie Yan walked up to the column and extended his right hand towards the cover of the book. The moment his fingers made contact, the book opened up by itself and began rapidly flipping through its pages. Suddenly, a narration began playing. Within this secret forest, you've discovered a thick book that chronicles the history of an ancient era. Upon placing your hand on the book, you suddenly feel a mysterious force enter your body. What's this? You inquire to yourself while brimming with curiosity. Shortly after, the pages in the book begin turning by themselves, revealing mysterious silver-leafed characters. From these characters, you learn this Annals of the Era of Shared Governance was written by a combination of 3 languages: the Kasate Giant Language, Ancient Universal Language, and Dragon Language. You record this newfound knowledge in your head. System: you've learned the language of the Kasate Giants. System: you've learned the language of the dragons. System: you've learned the ancient language of the common people. System: you've received the Annals of the Era of Shared Governance. The Atlanta continent contained over 300 languages. Before, Nie Yan had only learned the current common language, which was the language of the humans. Yet suddenly, he had learned 3 new languages. He quickly glanced over his information page and realized it had a new section titled Annals of the Era of Shared Governance. Within this section was a description of every notable event that had occurred during that era. This sort of data was invaluable. In the future, it could help Nie Yan accomplish many tasks and identify various items. This Annals of the Era of Shared Governance will save me a lot of time and trouble when completing quests related to that era. Nie Yan couldn't help but think to himself. Looking closely at the book, you are surprised to discover a separate piece of paper tucked away between the pages of the book. Numerous rows of mysterious, dark golden characters dotted this page. As you look over the lines of gibberish, you slowly realize that these characters belong to the language of the Kasate Giants and spell out Chapter of Courage. I've finally found it, Nie Yan pleasantly thought to himself as he glanced at the chapter's properties. Description: the 3rd chapter of the 1st volume of the Book of Order. A fragment of a legendary item. Whoever shall possess this chapter will receive the inheritance of the God of Light. Your mission is to spread the glory of light. Properties: receive 2 stat points and 1 mastery point every 5 levels. Focus plus 15, willpower plus 15, resilience plus 16, jump plus 15, reflex plus 15, speed plus 16. Transcendent insight. Gain the ability to see through your enemies. Allows you to view enemy character information. Also grants the ability to appraise items. Passive. Awareness plus 10. Adjudicator of God. Grants immunity to all magic, gain 500 health, and summon an advanced life-saving shield that absorbs 60% of all incoming damage for 5 minutes. This skill cannot be used in instances. Cooldown. 10 days, 1/10. Restrictions. Can only be bound by a member of the righteous guardian of order. Note: item effects are applied immediately upon entering the player's inventory. Nie Yan stared out blankly as his hands began to tremble lightly. He had seen the properties of this chapter on the internet in his past life before, but now, as he held the chapter in his hands, he experienced an entirely different feeling. He reckoned this adjudicator of God was the very skill the guild leader of Holy Empire, Sleepy Fox, had used to slaughter his way through 200 players in his past life. Not to mention, the skill even made the player immune to every single type of magic for 5 minutes. What kind of overpowered ability was this? What was even more disgusting was the fact that Sleepy Fox already had top-tier equipment in the first place. If you added immunity to all magic, 500 health, and a shield that absorbed 60% of all damage, then his strength would undoubtedly become excessive beyond reason. To meet him on the battlefield would simply be meeting a god of death. However, the cooldown period of the skill was still quite high. After all, it would take 10 days before the skill could be activated again, which was why most players wouldn't rashly use the skill unless they were at a critical juncture. And that was just the Adjudicator of God skill. The chapter's other properties were quite powerful as well, especially the one that allowed a player to gain an additional 2 stat points and 1 mastery point every 5 levels. Nie Yan was practically bursting with happiness. From his knowledge, the only classes that had a bonus that came close to this were shamans, paladins, and demon swordsmen, who also gained 2 additional stat points every 5 levels. Due to their characteristics, however, they had to evenly distribute their stats between strength and intellect, because they would practically be useless if they only focused on a single stat. However, a thief was different. On top of the 5 stat points and 1 mastery point he would gain every 5 levels from level 0 to 30, he would now also gain 2 additional stat points and 1 mastery point every 5 levels thanks to the Chapter of Courage. Nie Yan understood what this meant. If you included the other stat bonuses and properties of the chapter, Nie Yan had effectively leapt up to become one of the top experts, if not the strongest player in the game. This chapter from the Book of Order clearly lived up to its name as a legendary existence. After placing the Chapter of Courage into his knapsack, Nie Yan glanced at his stat page and found that several of his stats had risen by a large amount. When Adjudicator of God came off cooldown, he would become unequaled in terms of combat strength. However, from now on, he would have to take extra caution whenever he was killing mobs or fighting players. This was because the Chapter of Courage would immediately drop from his body if he died. The only way to prevent this was to find the other 5 chapters and complete the first volume of the Book of Order. Despite having finally retrieved the Chapter of Courage, Nie Yan didn't relax or loosen his guard at all. After storing the chapter in his knapsack, he took out a return scroll and began channeling it. Chapter 33. The Boss Emerges. Guardian of Order. Alarms rang out in Nie Yan's mind. He understood well what this announcement signified. He was currently in a sealed region. How could the game allow him to get the Chapter of Courage so easily? It was reasonable to assume that the chapter would have a guardian protecting it, which was a boss known as the Guardian of Order. However, up until now, why had it still not made an appearance? In the past, Nie Yan had merely skimmed through the video regarding the chapter. There was one thing, however, that remained deeply engraved in his mind: the imposing figure of the Guardian of Order. As Nie Yan thought about this, the ground beneath his feet began to violently tremble and crack. It was as though something below was attempting to force its way up. Nie Yan glanced at the path he took to get here, but found it had been obstructed by falling boulders. Shit. I have to make a run for it. He looked around, but there wasn't even a single exit anywhere in sight. With no other options left, he began heading towards the mountain. Upon arrival, he found a slope that didn't seem too steep and began nimbly climbing his way up. Many trees grew atop the mountain slope, giving him plenty of handholds. While climbing, Nie Yan suddenly recalled something. Oh right, the silk spinner ring. Up until now, he still hadn't found an opportunity to appraise the ring. However now, with transcendent insight, appraising it would be a cinch. He took the ring out from his knapsack and appraised it. Silk spinner ring, bronze unique accessory. Requirements. Level 0. Properties. Release a thread of silk that can adhere to certain surfaces. The thread can extend up to 5 meters in length and has a tensile strength of 200 pounds. Cooldown. 20 seconds. Weight. 0.05 pounds. Restrictions. Can be equipped by all factions. After equipping the silk spinner ring, he wanted to appraise Assassin's Decree as well. At that very moment, however, a powerful gust of heat was expelled from the valley below as the ground shattered into countless pieces. Like a volcanic eruption, countless boulders and rock fragments were sent flying into the air. Many of the trees in the valley had been uprooted and were strewn across the area, while others had spontaneously combusted, scene of utter and absolute destruction. At the very center of the valley, a horrifying crater of lava emerged and swallowed up everything within its reach. A dormant giant, awoken from its slumber, pulled itself up from deep beneath the ground. It was the servant of God and possessed the power to bestow divine judgment. I don't have much time. The suddenness of it all prevented Nie Yan from appraising the dagger, as he had to divert his attention back to scaling the mountain. The burst of heat had caught him off guard and he nearly slipped and fell back down to the valley below. Standing atop one of the many trees growing horizontally on the mountainside, Nie Yan glanced upwards, looking for the next handhold. After spotting one about 2 meters away, he leapt high up into the air and grabbed onto a protruding rock, then clambered up. With this, he had made some more progress scaling the mountain. Meanwhile, back at the valley, a giant head emerged from the cracks in the earth, followed by immense arms, a torso, and legs. From head to toe, the giant was roughly 60 meters in height. 2 wings covered in pitch-black feathers sprouted from its back. In its hand was a 30-meter-long crystal scepter. When it emerged from the earth, its entire body ignited with a blazing red aura, causing a whirlwind of scorching heat to rise and form at the center of the valley. With transcendent insight, Nie Yan could see the giant's stats. Guardian of Order, low-level intelligence level 100. Health, 200. 000/200. 000. The giant spoke with a bellowing voice that stretched far into the valley. Though whatever he was saying sounded like gibberish, it was actually the language of the dragons. His words roughly translated to, light and darkness alternate in cycles. I am the protector of God's will and guard his order. If there is a sinful person who desires to purloin the chapter from the Book of Order, then they shall receive divine judgment. Legends say that the guardians were birthed from the merging of giant and dragon. Viewed as freaks of nature, they were banished into the deep wilderness where they eventually received God's baptism. Entrusted with a task from God, they protect the various chapters scattered across the world. The guardian's gaze swept across its surroundings, finally coming to rest on a figure that had almost climbed to the mountain's peak. With a single beat of its massive wings, the giant's immense body rapidly rose up into the air. The giant bellowed, "Black flame tempest!" As if answering the giant's call, a scorching black cloud of flame emerged out of thin air and began rapidly congealing into a sphere. Afterwards, the ball of black flame shot towards Nie Yan.
BOM.
The black flame tempest exploded on the mountainside, scattering pitch-black fireballs in every direction and setting the entire area ablaze. Not far from Levin Hills, in a small forest town by the name of Link, the earth violently shook and trembled. Players who had gathered at the town were left frightened and anxious due to the sudden commotion. What's going on? Look over there, where the mountains are. The entirety of the mountain's peak had been engulfed in a cloud of black flame, and within those black flames emerged the immense silhouette of a figure hovering in the air. It was as though an apostle of destruction had arrived from the gates of hell itself. Soon, a disaster warning was issued in Link. Warning: a dragon has emerged south of Link. We advise all nearby players to depart the area immediately. After a few brief moments, a flash of brilliant light was emitted from the transfer point in Link. A group of fully armed NPC soldiers wearing bright silver armor had arrived in town. On the chest of each of these soldiers was a medal engraved with the insignia of the Holy Crusaders. The soldiers rapidly assembled in the public square, their numbers reaching in excess of several hundred. Within the Viridian Empire, there existed two elite armies which were considered to be the Empire's most powerful fighting forces. The first belonged to the Imperial Church and were known as the Holy Crusaders. This army was composed of over 500,000 troops, and their commander-in-chief was the Holy Mage, Jebiah the Great. They were tasked with the duty of protecting the entire empire. The second army was the Guardian Legion of the Temple of Light, known as the Temple Guards. They numbered less, at around 50,000 strong. Unlike the Holy Crusaders, however, their sole duty was to safeguard the Temple of Light and uphold the religion of the entire empire. These several hundred soldiers who had arrived to guard the town belonged to the Holy Crusaders. No wonder, it was a monster from the dragon race. The players vigorously chatted amongst themselves while gazing at the Guardian of Order who was hovering in the sky. The dragon race, an existence that was both powerful and distant to mankind. During the Dark Era, -2678 to 230, dragons had reigned supreme and established a mighty empire on the continent, which enslaved all other races. Eventually, their rule was toppled by the combined alliance of giants, humans, dwarves, elves, and beast men. To prevent facing retaliation from the dragons in the future, the alliance enacted a mass genocide of all dragons throughout the continent. Thus, the former glory of the dragon race was no more. However, they didn't simply fade from existence. There were still many dragons scattered across the continent, hidden away in their secluded abodes. The Viridian Empire had classified the Guardian of Order as a member of the dragon race. Although they were technically wrong, at least in regards to exterior appearances, there were only minute differences between the two. With the appearance of the NPCs, the minds of players began working. A monster of the dragon race had emerged, along with a large number of NPC soldiers. In such a scenario, the two parties were most certainly going to clash, which left the players wondering what sort of profits they could fish out from this spectacle. Soon the information became widespread, and with it, guilds began appearing one after another through the transfer point at Link. The three most prominent guilds were Splendid Temple, Dark Massacre, and Holy Empire, each of which had sent anywhere from 1,000 to over several thousand players. The equipment the dragon might drop truly represented an irresistible enticement for these guilds. In just a short period of time, Link had suddenly become armed to the teeth. Even the ballistae in the guard towers were being loaded and prepped. A few moments earlier, Nie Yan lifted his head and gazed at the immense figure hovering in the sky. The pair of wings on its back were large enough to blot out the entire sun. When the Guardian displayed its might by casting Black Flame Tempest, clouds of black flame emerged and covered the sky, before congealing into a dense fireball. As if it were a meteor, the dense ball of black flame crashed towards Nie Yan, engulfing everything in its path. The large black fireball exploded upon colliding with the mountain, sending several smaller fireballs scattering across the surroundings. On impact, they smashed boulders to rubble, created deep craters everywhere, and charred the earth black. Even when faced with such a situation, Nie Yan still didn't panic. Instead, by relying on his experience, eyesight, and judgment, he remained cool-headed and found a safe place to hide after calculating the fireball's trajectory. Fortunately, the fireballs weren't concentrated in a single area, but the explosive power of each individual fireball was still quite a terrifying sight to behold. Shit! He's coming down. Nie Yan tilted his head and gazed upward. He saw the Guardian of Order's immense body descending towards his general location like a hawk swooping down to catch its prey. This creature, which looked like it had come from the deepest layers of hell, definitely wasn't something he was currently capable of contending with. Compared to the Guardian, Nie Yan was such a frail existence that even so much as a slight touch from the Guardian of Order could end his life. Nie Yan didn't spare a single second as he began rapidly descending down the mountain. He made it about halfway before stopping at a steep cliff. As he peered downwards, he noticed it was roughly an 80 to 90 meter drop. Taking a quick glance behind, he saw the Guardian fast approaching his location. Without a second thought, he made a leap of faith and jumped off the cliff. BOM. The Guardian of Order descended onto the cliff where Nie Yan had just been standing moments ago. The impact of his landing shattered the surrounding rocks and boulders. As Nie Yan fell from the mountain, his speed rapidly increased. He could feel the vegetation growing on the cliffside sweeping past his ear. Occasionally, one or two branches would briefly break his fall, only to immediately snap after bearing the full force of his impact. -7, -9, -5. Each collision caused damage values to appear above his head one after another. Chapter 34. The Holy Crusaders. Nie Yan rapidly approached the earth, his body soon to crash into the ground. With his left arm extended, he activated the ability from the silk spinner ring. A web line shot out and adhered to the cliff face between the vegetation, slowly decelerating his descent. The line was tough and resilient and resembled a rubber band as it gradually stretched itself to the limit. The tension on the web line continuously increased. The force of Nie Yan's fall surpassed the silk line's tensile strength, and the line gave out with a snap, taking many of the branches and rubble from the cliff face along with it. Despite snapping, the web line still managed to significantly slow down his falling speed. -56. Thud. Nie Yan fell onto the ground. Fortunately, the fall damage wasn't too high and was within the limits of what his health could handle. In normal circumstances, if a player didn't have an item such as the silk spinner ring to cushion the fall, they would most certainly die. Having climbed and fallen over the other side of the mountain, the distance from his current location to Link wasn't too far off. With safety being his #1 priority, Nie Yan entered stealth and activated a basic haste scroll. From a half-withered bush at the base of the mountain, he made a sprint towards Link. The large crowds in the town should offer a little protection. Having failed its attack, the Guardian of Order beat its wings and hovered in the air. Nie Yan had already escaped the valley by entering stealth and disappeared without a trace. After the fall, Nie Yan and the Guardian were more than 100 meters apart. Even if the level disparity between them was high, it still couldn't make up for the distance. Hence, even if the Guardian had a clear view of Nie Yan, it would still be unable to see through his stealth. With regards to how stealth detection range was calculated, it depended on level disparity, the awareness stat, and observation ability. With some rough estimations, Nie Yan was confident that as long as he stood at least 100 meters from the Guardian, he would be safe from its detection. Even if it was a level 100 elite class, its level, awareness, and observational abilities couldn't make up for such a large gap in distance. Nie Yan turned his head to look back. At this point, the Guardian of Order still hadn't left the area. Rather, it was heading over in his direction to investigate. Without delay, Nie Yan held his breath and hid behind a large boulder. The Guardian beat its wings and flew over. As it hovered in the sky, it investigated the area below it for any signs of movement, but didn't manage to discover Nie Yan. The hunter and the hunted, the Guardian of Order was like the eagle in the sky, while Nie Yan was like the prey on the ground. There was still roughly a kilometer between him and Link. Under the attentive gaze of the Guardian, there was no way for him to safely travel such a large distance. There's still another method. I can use the return scroll. It was possible to use the return scroll in this location. However, it would take a full 20 seconds to activate. Moreover, when channeling, the scroll would emit a bright light which would definitely attract the Guardian of Order's attention. With its flying speed, the Guardian wouldn't need more than 10 seconds to fly over to Nie Yan and kill him after discovering his location. As the Guardian gradually descended from the air, the distance between it and Nie Yan became increasingly near. This'll be troublesome.
Nie Yan anxiously thought.
If the Guardian were to enter a range of less than 100 meters, it was possible for his hiding location to be detected. With every step, danger was slowly approaching. Since I can't hide and avoid it, I might as well try fleeing for my life. Only, I'm not sure if I can make the half-mile run. Just as the Guardian prepared to descend onto the ground. Whoosh! 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 3 arrows swiftly came flying over, all shot from afar. Each arrow separately aimed for its head, throat, and heart. The Guardian avoided them by flying to the side, causing all 3 arrows to miss their target. In the distance, atop a large withered old tree, a tall NPC archer wearing silver-plated armor drew his bow at whoosh. Whoosh! Whoosh! Another 3 arrows were fired into the air. The Guardian of Order let out a hiss. Seemingly resentful of the provocation of these low-level beings, it pounced towards the NPC. Several soldiers approached the archer in the tree. Commander Nisod, the defensive perimeter has been built. We're awaiting further instructions. reported the several fully equipped soldiers. It's approaching. Withdraw to Link. This foolish dragon will experience the divine judgment of the Holy Crusaders. Commander Nisode shot a glance at the Guardian of Order speeding towards them in the air. Afterwards, he returned the bow to his back, leapt from the tree, and gracefully landed on the ground. Under Commander Nicole's provocations, the Guardian of Order flew over Nie Yan's head and headed straight for Link. System. Level 1 Disaster Warning. Invasion of a Dragon. The Guardian bellowed in the dragon language, "Blazing meteor!" The Guardian brandished its scepter. An enormous meteor formed out of blazing flames fell from the sky and streaked towards Link. Flames were set ablaze in the sky. The meteor, 50 to 60 meters in size, would most likely engulf the surrounding 2,500 square meters. Activate the basic defensive formation. Commander Nisode climbed up to the tallest tower in Link and issued the order to those below him. Afterwards, a blue barrier began forming and protected the entire town within it. BOM. The meteor exploded over the barrier while fire blossoms scattered in all directions. The barrier trembled violently due to the impact. Even all the players within the town could feel the barrier trembling as the remnant heat and fire elements assaulted their senses. Attack! Commander Nisode issued out another order from the command tower. Immediately, every ballista within the town aimed at the Guardian of Order and fired. Whoosh! 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 Countless bolts flew through the air in a densely packed salvo. Simultaneously, several thousand archer and mage players also fired a volley of attacks. Meanwhile, the Guardian of Order unceasingly fired off its own magic attacks. Under its barrage of attacks, the barrier began showing signs of breaking as cracks appeared everywhere. A loud explosion echoed throughout the town as the barrier was shattered into pieces. With the barrier shattered, the Guardian rushed into the town and descended to the ground. With a single step, the Guardian crushed a nearby building, sending smashed tiles, bricks, and other building materials flying everywhere. The appearance of the Guardian wreaked havoc among the players in the town. Holy shit! It's a level 100 elite monster. Fighters, don't rush forward. Mages! Where are the F*King mages? All of you, fire your spells. Sure F*CK. Damn it! All of our attacks are misses. The level gap is too high. Panic and confusion spread through the players, and the town was in a state of chaos and upheaval. Over 10 heavily armored Holy Crusaders rushed forward to engage the Guardian. Surrounding the Guardian, the soldiers began their assault, but their countless attacks fell short and were the equivalent of raindrops as they landed on the Guardian's body. The Guardian was glowing red as a flaming aura surged from its scales. It was a terrifying existence which brought about destruction. With every swing of its scepter, a Holy Crusader would be smashed and sent flying. Buildings were crushed or knocked down, and the ground was scorched and charred, leaving a path of ruin wherever it passed. By the glory of the Holy Crusaders, my name is Commander Nisode, and I will pass divine judgment upon this sinister dragon. Tyrant impaling arrow. With these 3 words spoken, Commander Nisode placed his hand on the bowstring. He grunted heavily as he pulled back until it reached its maximum draw weight. He released the bowstring. The arrow fiercely spiraled forward and carried a biting cold rotating energy along with it. Bang. The arrow briefly encountered some resistance when it met with the Guardian's scales, only to immediately pierce into and bore its way through the Guardian's body. Minus 87,829. An unfeasibly high damage value had appeared above the Guardian's head. Nie Yan was lingering around the outskirts of the town. Under the numerous attacks of the town's soldiers, the Guardian of Order would soon be unable to resist any longer. He was curious what sort of equipment such a high-level monster like the Guardian would drop. It was a secondary weapon and was truly worthy of being gold tier level 5 with an attack of nearly 30. He would be able to equip it once he learned dual wielding and reached level 5. His attack would then rise tremendously when he possessed such a powerful weapon. After glancing at its properties, Nie Yan put Assassin's Decree back into his knapsack. As for whether the Guardian of Order would drop any equipment, Nie Yan didn't have high hopes. After all, The Guardian of Order was merely a protector, and its existence was simply to safeguard the chapters from the Book of Order. These types of beings frequently dropped no equipment. However, there were naturally always exceptions to these cases. Chapter 35, Trip. The chapters from the Book of Order weren't going to be left in incompetent hands, thus existences such as the Guardians of Order emerged. The game designers put in such a powerful creature to guard the chapter, yet only gave it low-level intelligence. Therefore, the Guardian of Order only acted by instinct, and its aggro system was the same as any other ordinary monster. Therefore, Commander Nisod's arrival had saved Nie Yan's life at the most critical juncture. There's actually quite a few people here. Nie Yan swept his gaze over the surrounding environment and noticed many other players eyeing the current battle like tigers watching their prey. The moment the Guardian of Order died, these 100 or so players would all simultaneously take action in an attempt to pilfer whatever equipment that dropped. There are so many people here. Even if the equipment does drop, I definitely won't be able to snatch it. I already got the chapter of courage. I should be satisfied with what I have. Nie Yan inwardly contemplated. He was an easily satisfied person. Thus he never held high hopes when situations occurred where it was certain he would not obtain anything. Nie Yan focused his gaze after peering past several obstacles and caught sight of a few acquaintances. Splendid Star, a 20-something-year-old man with a squarish jawline. He was the guild leader of Splendid Temple. Even though he couldn't be regarded as handsome, he was still passable in terms of looks. His clean-shaven face gave off a bright and refreshing kind of look. In Nie Yan's past life, he had friendly interactions with Nie Yan. Having helped Nie Yan on several occasions, he had a reckless personality but valued loyalty and friendship. In turn, Nie Yan had also accompanied him and his friends during several guild expeditions. Swift Slash, a sloppy-looking man and the 36-year-old guild leader of Dark Massacre. According to rumors, he was part of the criminal underworld and had quite a few underlings under his command. His personality was nothing great and on would every so often butt heads with Splendid Star. As such, Nie Yan himself didn't have too great of an impression on this person. Sleepy Fox, a player who was roughly 30 years old. Nie Yan wasn't too familiar with him, nor did they have any sort of relationship. However, as the guild leader of Holy Empire, he was a somewhat well-known name. It was rumored his prestige within the guild was fairly high. He was capable of leading Holy Empire into becoming one of the top 10 largest guilds. This achievement alone was proof of his strength. He was also the holder of the chapter of courage in Nie Yan's previous life. Splendid Star and his group were lying in wait among the ruined buildings in the west. Swift Slash and his group were located in the southwest. Both sides were watching like tigers awaiting their prey, ready to act any moment. On the other hand, Sleepy Fox was located in the east. The corner of his mouth curved into a ridiculing smile as he gazed at the two sides ready to duke it out. He planned to swoop in when both sides were exhausted. As he watched such a scene unfold, Nie Yan couldn't help thinking. What if Sleepy Fox were to know he had taken the chapter of courage which was supposed to belong to him? What kind of reaction would Sleepy Fox have? Would he grab all his men and unrelentingly chase him down? Swift Slash, with our Splendid Temple members here, your Dark Massacre Guild should just step off to the side. Don't be so unwilling to accept it. I was the first to reach level 5 before you. I was also the first to clear the Treyant Forest and Black Flame Forest before you. No matter in real life or in the game, I've always been ahead of you. Splendid Star bluntly proclaimed as he stared at Swift Slash in an unyielding manner. Swift Slash's face turned ashen. Splendid Star's words had infuriated him quite a bit. He sneered, "So what if your Splendid Temple Guild cleared the Black Flame Forest? Your clear rate was only 68%. It's nothing to brag about. Your guild's honor is only higher than ours by 200 points. Given some time, we'd easily catch up. We're 200 points ahead of you right now, but who knows? Maybe by tomorrow, we'll be ahead by 1,000, then the day after, 2,000. Trying to overtake us? Try again in your next life." Guild reputation was a representation of a guild's strength. Otherwise, why else would they care about such a tiny gap in honor points? Bastard! You're looking to die. What's so terrific about Splendid Star and his guild? Come on, let's kill them. A member of Dark Massacre passionately shouted from within the group. Brat, if you have the guts, then come up here. Over on Splendid Temple's side, their members were itching to go as well. However, neither side made a move and only continued cursing at each other. The main goal of their trip was still to secure the equipment the Guardian of Order might drop. This equipment was the target of all three guild leaders. Meanwhile, the Holy Crusaders vehemently resisted the Guardian of Order, not yielding by even a single inch. The archers at the rear continued to fire a rain of arrows, with every single one concentrated solely on the Guardian's body. The Guardian of Order thundered furiously and cast its magic. The deep and archaic dragon language echoed above Link with spells one after another pouring down like a torrent of raindrops. The Guardian of Order doesn't have much health left. Quick, snatch the equipment. No one knew which person shouted those words, but immediately, a deluge of players pounced towards the Guardian of Order. After Commander Nisode let out an explosive shout, a single arrow shot out from his bow and pierced the Guardian of Order's shoulder, causing blood to gush out everywhere. The Guardian issued a mournful cry before transforming into white light and vanishing in the air. A single gold piece of armor fell from where it had been. It's the equipment! Get it! Splendid Star coldly shouted. Kill whoever manages to snatch the equipment. The guild leader of Holy Empire, Sleepy Fox, also ordered from the guild chat. 300 to 400 players pounced from all directions and charged towards the armor that had fallen from the Guardian of Order. Every guild within the game could be seen included in the crowd, an especially chaotic scene to behold. He never expected the Guardian of Order would actually drop a piece of equipment. Moreover, it appeared the equipment dropped was gold grade as well. Seeing this, Nie Yan also charged into the fray. He was already here, so why not give it a try anyway? A berserker from Holy Empire had taken the lead by activating charge, which increased his speed by a significant amount. Soon, it appeared as if he were about to snatch the equipment at any moment. However, 10 spells immediately came flying over, bombarding his body simultaneously. After being hit by so many spells at once, his body transformed into a beam of white light and vanished. F***CK. Sleepy Fox, seeing the piece of equipment just within his grasp fly away once more, cursed loudly. Keep fighting! The three major guilds still didn't approach the dropped equipment. Instead, they began fighting and fired barrages of spells at one another. 7 or so players approached the dropped equipment and were immediately met with an explosion of spells that turned them into ashes. Nie Yan was roughly 20 meters from the dropped equipment with a member from Dark Massacre, a fighter, obstructing the path ahead. The fighter noticed Nie Yan and came forward to intercept him. With his body lowered, Nie Yan evaded and weaved his body past the fighter's attack. The fighter's body shot into empty space. He stared out blankly before turning his head. By that time, Nie Yan had already run far away. Charge! As a berserker, Sleepy Fox took the lead and rushed forward. Immediately, a dozen spells came bombarding towards him. As he was about to be hit, Sleepy Fox dodge rolled at the last moment. Of the dozen spells, only 3 managed to land on his body. The equipment belongs to me. Sleepy Fox felt ecstatic as he bent down to pick up the equipment on the ground. Don't be so quick to get happy. Swift Slash coldly shouted. Immobilize! Swift Slash brandished his staff, chanted several syllables, and cast Immobilize. Sleepy Fox's body immediately became rigid as he was rooted in place. While Swift Slash was a shadow priest, Immobilize was still a rarely seen spell that could cause a player's body to become rigid. At beginner level, it could root a player in place for 3 seconds. Damn it! Sleepy Fox cursed in his mind. He was unable to move any part of his body. At the same moment, Swift Slash and Splendid Star both simultaneously pounced towards the armor and drew increasingly near. 5 meters. 3 meters. In terms of speed, Swift Slash would definitely be able to snatch the armor before Splendid Star. Nie Yan had entered stealth and followed Swift Slash and Splendid Star closely from behind. However, the two were still faster than him by a pace, which meant he definitely wouldn't be able to snatch it away. Since he couldn't get the equipment himself, why not send it to a friend? Nie Yan swept his left leg out. Tripping was a basic movement in conviction. In melee combat, a player could trip their opponent and cause them to stumble. The success rate depended on the person's strength stat and the opponent's body weight. Fortunately, Nie Yan's left leg managed to stop right in front of Swift Slash's foot, causing him to immediately lose his balance and fall once his leg was hooked. Thud! Swift Slash fell onto the ground while Splendid Star extended his right hand and grabbed the armor before stuffing it into his bag. Only then did they realize there had been a thief following them closely from behind. After retrieving the equipment, Splendid Star gave Nie Yan a grateful glance and said, "Thank you." He discovered he didn't recognize this thief's face at all. He wasn't a part of their guild and Splendid Star had never met him before. However, regardless, this thief had still helped him at this moment. Chapter 36, Sleepy Fox. With the gold-grade armor having found an owner, Splendid Star hastily returned to his guild ranks. Sleepy Fox felt extremely vexed. If Swift Slash hadn't abruptly rooted him in place, that gold-grade armor would have belonged to him. Some felt elated and others felt upset, but no one could surpass the joy Splendid Star currently felt because he had become the biggest winner this time around. He glanced over and observed Nie Yan. Earlier, the timing of this thief's trip, albeit a basic movement, was simply perfect. No matter the timing or position, he was not even a single iota off. The perfection of his timing and positioning definitely wasn't by coincidence. It was intentional. Moreover, Nie Yan was closer to him at that time. Reasonably enough, if Nie Yan had attempted to trip him instead, he'd have no way to evade. However, Nie Yan still purposefully chose Swift Slash. If it weren't for this, the gold-grade armor would have never fallen into his hands. I didn't manage to get anything. Nie Yan shrugged his shoulders and spoke in an indifferent manner, then turned around to leave. You want to leave after all that? Don't think you're going to be let off that easily. Swift Slash coldly snorted. If it weren't for Nie Yan, the equipment would have definitely belonged to him. In the same moment he spoke, several dozen Dark Massacre members in the area coldly shouted and began converging around Nie Yan, blocking his exit in a semicircle. What? You people want to detain me here? Nie Yan's replied with an unperturbed smile. However, his mind was still deeply scheming. It would be somewhat difficult if he wanted to break out of Swift Slash's encirclement with his power alone. Moreover, if Swift Slash wanted to come to blows, Nie Yan felt he wasn't a good person to provoke either. He's my friend. Swift Slash, if you want to cause him problems, first ask yourself if our splendid temple members will approve or not. Splendid Star interrupted, seemingly determined to oppose Swift Slash as he stood shoulder to shoulder with Nie Yan. While behind him, the splendid temple members, after hearing their leader voice out his opinion, stepped up as well. It was only because of him that Nie Yan ended up provoking Swift Slash. So naturally, he wouldn't stay himself from the matter at hand. Splendid Star, are you certain you want to contend against me? Swift Slash coldly threatened. Correct, our splendid temple isn't afraid of your Dark Massacre Guild. Brothers, tell me if I'm correct. Splendid Star turned back and asked his guild members. Correct. The people from Splendid Temple roared in unison. If you Dark Massacre people have the guts, then come up and fight. This old man will happily accompany you. You ballless sons of bitches. Don't tell me you're suddenly afraid. The people from Splendid Temple began shouting obscenities, with both sides entering a shouting match afterwards. With swords drawn and bows bent, either side began forming their respective ranks. The atmosphere smelled of fresh gunpowder. A fight was going to break out at any moment. Splendid Temple had over 700 players remaining, while Dark Massacre had nearly 1,000. From the look of things, each side had taken heavy losses from the Guardian of Order. Thus, in terms of numbers, Splendid Temple was at a disadvantage. Nie Yan glanced at Splendid Star by his side. This guy was the exact same in Nie Yan's past life. He valued loyalty quite a bit. It appeared Nie Yan didn't make a mistake in helping Splendid Star today. However, if they were going to face off against Dark Massacre, Nie Yan had to bear the brunt. It seemed the upcoming battle was going to be considerably dangerous and fierce. If he died, the loss in level and experience were of lesser importance. What was most important was the chapter of courage, an item he absolutely didn't want being dropped. It appears I have no business being here. Sleepy Fox laughed, bringing his companions off to the side. If a large spectacle were about to begin, then why not have it play out a little quicker? Either way, the matter was unrelated to him, so he could not get involved with it. As for the gold-grade armor, there was nothing he could do since he wasn't able to get his hands on it. Among the Holy Empire members, a certain paladin wearing bright silver armor walked to the front and leaned over beside Sleepy Fox's ear. "Boss, that thief is the expert I mentioned before," the paladin said as he pointed his finger towards Nie Yan. Astonishingly, he was the paladin Nie Yan had crossed paths with before, Flying Stone. "Eh!" Sleepy Fox exclaimed in surprise. He then observed Nie Yan from the distance. It appeared this Nie Yan was still quite young. However, his skills were fairly good. From his actions earlier, he resembled a leopard as he went to trip Swift Slash. He's only level 3. Don't tell me his team was so strong they were able to clear Fallen Shaman Camp at that level. "Boss, what are we gonna do?" Stone asked. After all, they were still somewhat acquainted with Nie Yan. Moreover, at this moment, he sincerely believed that they should help Nie Yan. "Let me think it over." Sleepy Fox pondered for a long time. For Nie Yan, was it worth it to make an enemy out of Dark Massacre solely for his sake? After a brief moment, he had his answer. Since the beginning, Sleepy Fox had never attached importance to a small fry guild such as Dark Massacre.
"Hey, brother Nie Yan.
In a few days, our Holy Empire Guild is planning to run Agmota Muddy Wetlands. I wonder if you're interested in joining." Sleepy Fox loudly called out. Sleepy Fox's abrupt interruption immediately caught everyone's attention. Even Swift Slash and Splendid Star simultaneously cast their gaze over in Sleepy Fox's direction. Splendid Temple and Dark Massacre were currently in a deadlock. Thus, the intentions of the Holy Empire Guild were especially important to take note of, because whoever Holy Empire decided to help would directly influence the outcome of the battle. "How does Sleepy Fox recognize me?" Nie Yan shot a glance at Sleepy Fox and saw Stone standing by his side.
"Ah.
So, it was like this. The Agmoto Muddy Wetlands, huh? Sure, I can think it over. However, if you want me to clear a dungeon with you, I have one condition. I get the first pick on any thief equipment I have used for," Nie Yan replied. At this moment every player, be they Dark Massacre, Splendid Temple, or even Holy Empire, focused their gaze on Nie Yan. They discovered he was no more than an average player who hadn't even joined a guild yet. However, why would the guild leader of Holy Empire, Sleepy Fox, invite him on a dungeon run? Even more outrageous was the fact Nie Yan didn't immediately accept. He even made excessive demands. Getting first priority on all thief equipment, who the hell does he think he is? Holy Empire was a famous guild among the player base. With 56,000 honor points, it was an existence which far overshadowed the likes of Splendid Temple and Dark Massacre. In the eyes of players, guild prestige was the index for whether a guild was strong and powerful. Every cleared instance as well as completing quests for the first time guaranteed some honor points. Naturally, the honor points received increased with instance difficulty. Therefore, the higher the guild prestige, the more likely it was to find strong experts within the top rankings of the guild. Another benefit was the ability to attract elite players to the guild. At any rate, the guild leader of Holy Empire, Sleepy Fox, could be regarded as a celebrity. Moreover, this celebrity surprisingly invited an obscure no-name player like Nie Yan to run a dungeon with him. This was truly a strange and unforeseen turn of events. Many players looked at Nie Yan with differing expressions. However, what they all shared in common was the extreme jealousy and envy in their heart. After all, most players would be extremely honored and elated to have been personally invited to a dungeon run by the guild leader of Holy Empire himself. A lone Tempest thief moved closer to Sleepy Fox's side and berated, "Leader, that guy's way too outrageous." The moment he opened his mouth, he requested first pick on all thief drops. Who the hell does he think he is? He then shot a cold glance at Nie Yan. If Nie Yan were to enter their team, wouldn't that mean all the thief equipment would go to him? What would there be left remaining for himself then? Like I said before, Nie Yan is an expert. Trying to invite him definitely won't be easy, Stone instantly refuted back. After hearing Nie Yan's demands, Sleepy Fox laughed. He's truly got quite an ego. Previously, I still didn't believe he was an expert. However, this time around, I could be considered more or less convinced. Since he dared to be so arrogant with his requests, it must mean he has a little skill. Stone nodded his head and took a glance at the Tempest thief to his side. Since the guild leader voiced his opinion, that thief could only turn his head off to the side dejectedly. Brother Nie Yan, if you're willing to agree, then naturally all thief drops will go to you first, Sleepy Fox straightforwardly replied. Sleepy Fox unexpectedly agreed to Nie Yan's excessive demands. Everyone present stared with widened eyes. This was too unbelievable. The expression of all the surrounding players turned strange as they gazed at Nie Yan. Just who was this person if he was capable of making Sleepy Fox concede so much just in order to befriend him? Chapter 37. Joke becomes a reality. Since Sleepy Fox was capable of leading the Holy Empire to a position of reverence, it meant he had a little boldness in him. Nie Yan pondered for a brief moment. If he wanted to be fully equipped with top-tier gear, it wouldn't be possible unless he ran dungeons. The equipment that could be bought in stores and the auction house were mostly second-rate gear because most guilds were unlikely to sell the equipment if it was a rare drop. The only method for obtaining the best gear was by running dungeons with a team. Although Holy Empire's elite team wasn't as strong as the one in his previous life, they were still a decent alternative. If that's the case, send me a message when you're ready to run the dungeon, Nie Yan replied. Swift Slash was also listening to the conversation going on between Nie Yan and Sleepy Fox. At this moment, Dark Massacre had been put in an awkward situation. If he wanted to deal with Nie Yan, not only would he have to go up against Splendid Temple, he'd have to face Holy Empire as well. How could his own forces possibly stand up against two entire guilds? Swift Slash, spare me some face. Let's forget about the matters that occurred today, alright? Brother Nie Yan is a friend of mine, Sleepy Fox said with a smile. His smiling expression contained a trace of danger. If Swift Slash wasn't willing to look past his grievances, Sleepy Fox's Holy Empire certainly wouldn't be as easy to deal with as Splendid Temple. Since guild leader Sleepy Fox has spoken, I'll let this matter pass. Swift Slash swept his gaze at Nie Yan and Splendid Star and coldly snorted. He then turned to face his party. We're leaving. Swift Slash brought the rest of Dark Massacre with him and departed. After his departure, Sleepy Fox began walking over to Nie Yan's side. Seeing Sleepy Fox walking over, Splendid Star looked beside him and said, "Wow, I never thought you were friends with the guild leader of Holy Empire. As for today's matters, thank you." Splendid Star made conjectures but no definite conclusions regarding Nie Yan's identity. However, since Sleepy Fox was treating him so courteously, he must have some kind of background. We just happened to meet by chance, nothing too close, Nie Yan replied with a faint smile. Is that so? Splendid Star examined Nie Yan's facial expression and determined it was unlikely he was lying. However, if that were the truth, the manner in which Sleepy Fox treated Nie Yan really was worth thinking over. Brother Splendid Star, your harvests today were rather decent, Sleepy Fox interrupted. An amiable smile lay on his face and his tone was serene. He did not mention the conflict that had occurred moments ago, as if what they were fighting for was merely a single piece of equipment. This was expected of the leader of Holy Empire. Sleepy Fox did indeed have a fairly broad heart. Brother Fox, please don't bring that up. If you want this gold-tier armor, there's no harm in giving it to you as a gift, Splendid Star replied dejectedly. Why is that? Don't tell me the equipment's properties are bad. It's not that. The properties aren't bad. You'll understand when you see it for yourself. Afterwards, Splendid Star shared the properties of the gold-tier armor he had just recently obtained. Unyielding Armor of Courage, Gold. Requirements: Level 100. Properties: Defense 585 to 621, Thorn's Aura +5, Strength Blessing +12, Counter +15. Weight: 38 pounds. Restrictions: Warrior. Can be equipped by all factions. Sleepy Fox sucked in a breath of air. It is a gold-tier armor. Ah, what a pity. Sleepy Fox sighed after exclaiming in admiration. This armor was strong, but it was currently useless as it could only be equipped at level 100. Who the hell knew how long that would take to reach? Indeed, it's a pity. Moreover, the properties on it are rather decent too. I went through such hardships to get this armor only to discover I have to wait until level 100 to equip it. Even if I threw it up in my shop, I doubt many people would want it. Splendid Star sighed. It was no wonder Splendid Star felt so dejected. No matter, just chuck it in your storage and treat it as a treasure, Sleepy Fox comforted with a smile. Ha ha! Indeed, it is a treasure. Splendid Star laughed loudly. He then stored the armor back into his bag. Expert, we meet again. Next time, we'll able to run a dungeon together. The Paladin Flying Stone walked over and greeted with an excited laugh. Aha! Nie Yan replied with a slight nod. When everyone from Holy Empire suddenly began referring to Nie Yan as expert, Splendid Star stared at him with an astonished expression. Just how high was his degree of skill? I still have business to attend to, so I'll be leaving first. I won't be troubling you two guild leaders any longer. Nie Yan excused himself and said his farewells. He still had many matters left unattended. The current highest-leveled player within the game was already level 6. Moreover, the experts of top guilds like Sleepy Fox and his group were all level 5. Although Nie Yan did indeed obtain quite a few good pieces of equipment, this time around, the fact remained that he still had to slowly catch up bit by bit. Hence, he didn't want too much of his time being squandered. Brother Nie Yan, don't forget your promise. Sleepy Fox, seeing Nie Yan wanted to depart, quickly called out and reminded him of their promise. I'll be fine as long as you give me 3 hours prior notice, Nie Yan replied. I'll add you as a friend then, Sleepy Fox suggested and sent Nie Yan a friend request. Me as well, Splendid Star interrupted and sent Nie Yan a friend request at the same time. He also sent Sleepy Fox one as well. Holy Empire was much stronger than Splendid Tempest. Thus, adding Sleepy Fox as a friend undoubtedly gained him a powerful ally as well. System. You've added Sleepy Fox as a friend. System. You've added Splendid Star as a friend. In his previous life, Nie Yan and Splendid Star had only been mere acquaintances. He had sold many pieces of equipment to Splendid Star with methods such as real-life credit exchanges. However, whenever Nie Yan sold to Splendid Star, he would always buy them 10% above the market price, which aided Nie Yan out of several desperate situations. Thus, their relationship in Nie Yan's past life carrying over in this one could also be considered a type of fate. After leaving Sleepy Fox and Splendid Star, Nie Yan headed in the direction of Link's transfer point. Due to the devastation and havoc caused by the Guardian of Order running amok, Link had become a ruin of its former self. Barely any buildings remained standing. I can finally finish Physician Blevins' quest. However, it's still best if I purchase more bat teeth first, Nie Yan pondered. Quite a bit of time had already passed, so the players should have picked up quite a few bat teeth by now. As for Physician Blevins, since he had already issued the quest, he wouldn't leave before the deadline ended. Nie Yan arrived at Mordor and hung up his sign, 1 copper for 1 stack of bat teeth. Immediately, the area bustled with activity and a large crowd of players gathered around his shop. From Nie Yan's perspective, these players were akin to an oncoming wave of money. Brother, you're here to purchase bat teeth again? I have a stack here with me. I have a stack as well. The business was even livelier than it had been earlier in the morning. Nie Yan's storage began rapidly accumulating with bat teeth. Only after an hour did business slow down. However, by that time, his personal storage had no less than 3,000 stacks of bat teeth piled up. He also made trips to 2 other towns and purchased 2,000 more stacks. Afterwards, he exchanged all 5,000 stacks of bat teeth with Blacksmith Cade for a net profit of 50 silvers. In addition to his remaining capital, he had a total of 61 silvers in inventory. The average beginner player regarded this amount as an unimaginably large sum of money. I've purchased quite a few bat teeth today. I'll wait until tomorrow and continue buying more, Nie Yan thought. He glanced at the time June 7th. It appeared the day after tomorrow would be the announcement for the opening of a new dungeon, Sazal Valley. When the time came, He guessed many large guilds would be lining up to explore the area. Suddenly, Nie Yan recalled a certain something and smacked his head. How did I manage to forget this too? The final boss in the level 3 dungeon, Sazal Valley, named Busso the roaming werewolf, was quite difficult to deal with. Moreover, the claws of the werewolves in the dungeon were all coated with a highly toxic poison. Perhaps, not few would horrendously fall victim to this dungeon. For example, in his previous life, he and his friends had been met with such a fate when they first made their attempts. Before the dungeon had opened, one of the known cures for the poison, black phenol, only sold for 2 coppers each, and the recipes to create it only sold for 60 coppers each. However, once the dungeon opened, on that day alone the price of black phenol shot up by 500%, and the recipe's price shot up by 1,000. One of his friends joked around about the matter, saying if he could go back in time, he would have stocked up on black phenol and black phenol recipes with the intent of striking it rich once the dungeon opened. At that time the matter had only been a joke, but who could have known Nie Yan would actually go back in time? This joke had ended up becoming a reality. Chapter 38, Boots of Swiftness, Gold. Nie Yan's train of thought suddenly diverged. It wasn't only Sazal Valley. Similar situations had occurred during the future openings of other dungeons. For example, with the opening of Golden City, the prices of equipment with dark resistance +5 or higher increased by tenfold. When Spectre Gorge opened, the prices of equipment with focus +7 or higher increased by 20-fold. This sort of situation occurred frequently with the opening of a new dungeon, so by no means was a case like Sazal Valley isolated. After going back in time, there were opportunities to strike it rich everywhere, yet he had still worried about not making enough money. Nie Yan arrived at the auction house and opened their catalog page. Within their alchemy section, he found a large amount of black phenol. Altogether, there were a little over 180 bottles for sale, with each bottle selling for around 2 coppers. The current amount of uses this black phenol had were quite limited, which made them hard to sell and was the reason their price could not rise any higher. Nie Yan bought all 180 bottles without the slightest hesitation. He then checked the subsection for alchemy recipes, 56 black phenol formulas in total, each selling for 20 or so coppers. He bought all of these in one go as well. At this point in time, black phenol was classified as a useless material. However, very soon players would quickly learn of its value. The moment Sazal Valley opened, they would return to purchase black phenol, only discover its price had already sharply increased to a nearly unimaginable level. From then on, the market price of black phenol would stabilize at no less than 10 coppers per bottle. Moreover, it could be frequently sold for higher. When he finished purchasing what he needed from the auction house, Nie Yan began walking over to the personal storage. He planned to leave these items there until the day Sazal Valley opened. After all, it was too much trouble keeping them on his body. 5 alchemists, each wearing a silver moon-shaped badge, strolled past Nie Yan. They paid him no heed as they passed by, seemingly enveloped in their own banter. How strange! I wanted to buy a black phenol recipe to level up my alchemy, but who would have they were sold out. I had no choice but to buy a silver phenol formula instead. How is that possible? How many people, if any, ever buy that kind of item? When I checked in the morning, there were still 50 or 60 formulas for sale in the auction house. Why would I lie to you? If you don't believe me, go check for yourself. Not only the formula, even the item itself was all sold out. Indeed, that's strange. When Nie Yan listened to the conversation of these alchemists, the corner of his mouth couldn't help curving into a slight smile as these several players walked by. When he arrived, Nie Yan deposited all of the black phenol formulas and bottles of black phenol inside his storage. Afterward, he purchased a few more consumables: haste scrolls, strength scrolls, underwater breathing pills, etc. He then arrived at Telek town through the transfer point and ran in the direction of Lake Rando. There was still half an hour until the servers shut down. So if possible, he'd like to hand in the quest before going offline. Nie Yan used a basic haste scroll and increased his speed by 20%. After 30 seconds, the buff would fade away. However, he would immediately use another one to maintain his high travel speed after the basic haste scroll's cooldown disappeared. If word of Nie Yan's actions were to spread, he would certainly receive a flurry of angry complaints from other players. The average player, even when encountering danger, wouldn't be willing to rashly use a luxury item such as the basic haste scroll. However, Nie Yan was simply using this scroll for no other reason than to slightly increase his speed so he could save a bit of time. The fishmen village appeared at the edge of Nie Yan's vision. However, as he neared, he discovered the village had been turned into ruins. There were fishmen corpses littered everywhere. This was the work of Victorious Return. However, all of their members had already departed. Under the glow of the sunset, the broken-down huts of the fishmen village appeared especially bleak. However, after the servers shut down, everything would respawn by tomorrow. After clearing the fishmen village, at the very least, Victorious Return received 10 pieces of silver-grade equipment. If their luck was good, they may have even obtained 1 or 2 pieces of gold-grade equipment. Additionally, they also obtained a large quantity of fish-scale leather that was used to craft equipment. Turns out the members from Victorious Return move pretty quickly.
Nie Yan thought.
He felt a slight sense of crisis developing in his heart. Though his enemies were great in number, the most important point was that even if he was developing on his own, their growth wouldn't halt either. After passing the fishmen village, Nie Yan dived headfirst into Lake Rando and quickly swam towards Physician Blevins' little island. Around 10 minutes later, Center Island was finally within his vision. When he gazed at the island, he could make out the lonesome figure of an elderly man off in the distance. He appeared to be fishing from the shoreline underneath the waning light of the setting sun. I wonder what sort of reward I'll obtain this time around. When Nie Yan thought of this, he couldn't help but increase his pace. Youngster, you've returned. How are you doing with the task I entrusted you? Physician Blevins asked, after seeing Nie Yan come ashore. Senior, I've gathered all of the materials you requested. These are the 90 fine silks Senior tasked me to retrieve. I hope they are enough to aid in Senior's task. Nie Yan then handed the fine silks to Physician Blevins. At last, I've collected enough fine silk. It seems I can return to the Hilton stronghold by the next day. The brave warriors at the stronghold will remember your kindness. Generous and benevolent adventurer, may the holy radiance bless you. The darkness will finally disappear and light will spread throughout the continent, Physician Blevins replied in a hopeful tone as he stored the fine silks into his satchel. System, your influence in Hilton stronghold has increased by 11. Nie Yan glanced at the system announcement that had just appeared. In certain regions, the higher a player's influence, the easier it would become for that player to receive specific quests. Moreover, the player would also receive preferable treatment and discounts when purchasing items. When can I head to the Hilton stronghold for a visit? I can't let these 11 influence points go to waste. Nie Yan couldn't help but think. May God bless the brave warriors stationed at the stronghold. Nie Yan acted in a sincere manner and replied with a prayer as well. This type of tone and speech when speaking to an NPC absolutely made a difference. These things can be regarded as a token of my heartfelt appreciation. Generous and benevolent adventurer, I wish you a pleasant journey. System, you have received 16,523 experience points. System, you have received boots of swiftness, gold. Nie Yan thought he would receive 3 pieces of equipment as a reward for the quest, 1 for every 20%. He never expected in reality, he would only receive 1. Maybe this was one of those quests that gave a better reward the more you handed in at once. Unexpectedly, the reward, this time, was a pair of gold-grade boots. He examined the properties for this pair of boots. Boots of swiftness, gold. Requirements: Level 5. Properties: Defense 19 to 21, Resilience plus 11, Movement speed plus 12. Weight 2 pounds. Restrictions: Thief. Can be equipped by all factions. It adds 11 points of resilience and 12 points in movement speed. What a good item! Every point of resilience increased health by 2 and slightly increased defense. 11 resilience was an increase in 22 health and 11 defense. Moreover, the boots also had the property of movement speed plus 12. It was simply one of the best pieces of equipment you could get at the early levels. I finally have a good pair of boots to use at level 5. Nie Yan stored the boots of swiftness into his bag. Afterward, he expressed his gratitude to Physician Blevins. When he checked his experience bar, it was already at 97%. He would level up very soon. There were still 10 minutes or so before the servers shut down. He swam over to the nearby water spiders in the area and began killing. After 10 minutes of non-stop training and 10 spiders later, he had only risen to 98%. It looks like I won't be able to level up today. I'll randomly kill a few mobs first thing tomorrow and I should be able to level up by then. Whatever, I'll just get off now, Nie Yan thought. Since there was less than a minute remaining, it wasn't enough time for him to kill another monster. Thus, he logged off and lifted the gaming helmet off his head. Chapter 39. Frail, Sickly, and Poor. When Nie Yan exited the game, he immediately began an intense and rhythmic exercise regimen consisting of resistance training, squats, boxing, martial arts, and reflex training. He completed each set of exercises 10 times, only stopping once every 5 minutes to rest and replenish his stamina with nutritional supplements. Besides punching force, strong kicking power was also an important requirement in martial arts as well. Nie Yan was prepared to do weighted squats. His 2 legs immediately felt strained when he attached 30 kilograms of weight to his body. He placed both hands behind his head and began lowering his body from a standing position. He stopped when his knees bent at a near 90-degree angle, and then he began returning to his original position. 1 repetition. 2 repetitions. After 3 repetitions, not much time had passed, yet his back had already began to sweat. When he completed 20 repetitions, he felt his entire body was on the verge of collapse. However, after drinking some nutrition tonic and resting for 2 minutes, he continued onward with his second set of squats. Within his moment of rest, his stamina progressively recovered while his exhaustion was swept away. After going back in time, my current body's recovery ability is rather decent. With such a good aptitude, I definitely can't let it go to waste, Nie Yan couldn't help but think. When his body began gradually adapting to the additional weights, he added another 5 kilograms. He then picked up his machine dynamics textbook and began studying while doing squats. His body was pushed to its physical limits, yet he clenched his teeth and continued to persevere. The combined application of the lever arm and torque inside the machine. The calculation of current strength. The problems I had so much trouble with in the past were actually this easy. Nie Yan began writing and drawing on his notebook. His writing speed was fairly quick. In but a brief moment, he had solved a highly difficult problem regarding current strength. His body was exhausted at this moment. However, his mind was exceptionally active. Even if he returned to the past, he had still experienced a lifetime's worth of bitterness and solitude. Therefore, Nie Yan knew it was not easy to come by his current happy life. He wanted everyone in his life to be happy. He wanted himself to become stronger. No matter if it was in game or real life, economical ability or personal fighting accomplishments, he had to be strong in all those areas. Only then could he have the power to protect all that he held dear. Chao Su, if you're unwilling to let my family go in this life as well, I'll definitely kill you. Nie Yan's expression flickered with murderous intent. He then added another 5-kilogram weight and quickened his pace. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The sound of his heavy breathing echoed out of the room. The affection for his loved ones and the hatred for his enemies, these were 2 emotions were at extremes. However, either one of them could cause a person to burst with endless potential and ability. And, at this moment, both were propelling him to move forward. 97, 98, 99. Nie Yan had reached his limit long ago. He was persevering solely through willpower alone. The weights were pushing down on his body. He was unable to breathe. However, at that moment, he explosively roared, 100! Nie Yan put every single muscle fiber within his being to use. Bearing the 40-kilogram weights which weighed down on his body, he shakily pushed himself upright. In the instant he straightened out his body, he felt he had drained every last ounce of strength he had. An intense fatigue rushed forth as he collapsed on the floor. Ha! I reached my limit. Nie Yan lay on his back while repeatedly gasping for breath, every muscle aching with pain. Even under this extreme fatigue, he could still feel the exhaustion gradually lightening in the same way as before. Nie Yan crawled back up after resting on the floor for 5 minutes. He felt his fatigue had significantly lessened as he stretched his 4 limbs. Perhaps I should go out and test my strength, Nie Yan thought. This was an era where everyone engaged in some form of physical tempering. Nearly every citizen practiced taekwondo, kickboxing, or some other form of martial arts. There were martial arts facilities littered everywhere along any street. Usually, these martial arts facilities had several experts hired as instructors to teach patrons. Fitness equipment and exercise machines were incorporated into these facilities much like a regular gym. These facilities charged a fixed fee every hour for patrons who wished to use the equipment and machines. The working hours for the average person were quite brief, so most people liked to spend their spare time exercising at these facilities. People who didn't exercise were looked down upon by the rest of society. Even when it came to picking up girls, men who knew martial arts would have a much easier time. Furthermore, there were frequent appearances of beautiful women with fantastic figures at these martial arts facilities. Nie Yan had been through it all in his past life. He had gone mad from grief, insane from hopelessness, and debaucherous as well. He became even more of a silkpants when his father gained success. He had loitered around at all types of locations, and he especially never forgot or neglected those facilities where all the beautiful women frequented. Occasionally, he would even play around all through the night. At that time, he truly had the type of disgusting personality people could not bear. Xie Yao was the only thing that acted as a restraint in his mind and prevented him from crossing the line. Only when his father had suffered under Chao Su's attacks did he finally return to being studious and well-behaved. However, by then it was already too late. When he was well off in his previous life, he had never gone to the martial arts facilities to actually train, but to chase girls instead. This time around, his mentality and experiences were widely different. Nie Yan walked over to the nearest martial arts facility in his area, Lin Family Martial Arts Facility. It was a facility run by the father of one of his classmates. However, this classmate wasn't someone he could particularly stand, so he hoped he wouldn't encounter her when he entered the facility. The Lin Family Martial Arts Facility couldn't be counted as particularly large, but it was still of a decent size. The interior decorations weren't bad either, and the various kinds of equipment and exercise machines were all available. In other words, within the local area, it could still be considered well-known. Nie Yan stepped into the facility. As he lowered his head and looked at the reception counter, a familiar figure entered his eyes. Damn it! Why is she at the desk today? The one receiving customers at the desk was Lin Jia. Truthfully, he and Lin Jia could be said to have a slight connection. They both lived near each other and were classmates in elementary school, middle school and high school. Her looks weren't bad either. She was one of the prettiest girls in middle school. Though, when they reached high school, her looks became sorely outclassed compared to the other girls he met. In Nie Yan's eyes, there was no need for comparison when it came to her and Xie Yao. It was debatable if you tried to pass the one off as good-looking, while the other was undoubtedly a beauty that moved many hearts. Despite this, during middle school, he did indeed have a crush on this girl. He had even written her a love letter, which was promptly rejected when it was received. Sometime after the event, she began proclaiming publicly that Nie Yan was secretly in love with her, which left him with basically no face. This event left him with a shadow in his heart that he wasn't able to break free from until he transferred schools to the city. As he gradually grew older, he came to understand that Lin Jia was a very vain type of person. How could someone like her ever be together with an impoverished person like him? Later on, after Nie Yan turned from a poor boy into a silkpants, she and Nie Yan crossed paths again during a gathering at his place one night. That night Nie Yan threw $300,000 worth of banknotes at her. During the whole ordeal she remained surprisingly tactful. After taking the money, she left and never tried to tangle with or get close to Nie Yan again. As he recalled this annoying memory, Nie Yan became unwilling to think of it any further. Nie Yan turned to leave. However, after pausing for a moment, he had a change of heart. Mentally, he was already a 20-something-year-old man. There was no need for him to be bothered because of this little girl. In any case, he was going to transfer schools in the future. By then, he would have no relation to her at all. Why would he have to hide? Boss, give me a card for 2 hours. Nie Yan placed $50 on the desk counter. The voice could still be regarded as somewhat familiar to her. She lifted her head to look at the person who spoke and discovered it was Nie Yan. Waving him away, she revealed a disdainful expression and said, "You came here to find me, right? Well, I don't have any free time, so leave." In her heart, there was no difference between Nie Yan and a loudly buzzing housefly. Lin Jia was indeed a little pretty. She wore a silk dress with a neckline that exposed a large area of white skin. Her cheeks were smooth and clean. Her eyebrows were drawn in a curve with eyeliner. Paired with her bright eyes, it did indeed make her seem somewhat coquettish. However, before Nie Yan's current gaze, Lin Jia was nothing more than a little girl who knew how to dress up slightly, that's all. During middle school, his eyes must have truly been covered with shit to have been infatuated with a girl like her. Later on, during several student gatherings, he had found girls more beautiful than her everywhere. At that time he realized she was only considered more beautiful because she was slightly better than her peers at dressing up and putting on makeup. This was the sole reason she was able to stay popular during their time together in middle school and high school. "I want a 2-hour card to use the gym." Nie Yan indifferently glanced at Lin Jia. "Nie Yan, I already told you. Stop coming around to pester me. With a scrawny matchstick appearance like yours, you still want to come here and exercise." Lin Jia replied with a sneer on her face. She then waved her hand and threw a card at Nie Yan. This girl has been watching too many television dramas. Nie Yan was too lazy to bother with this girl. He picked up the exercise card and headed farther into the facility. Lin Jia still wanted to say a few more words, but Nie Yan had already turned around. Thus, what was left facing her was only his back. The few words she had left to say were swallowed back down her throat. However, she then followed with a sneer and said, "Your family owes $600,000 in debt, making you a penniless bum. Your group of relatives drop by every day demanding repayment, and your parents are nowhere to be found. You still have the whim to come here and exercise." When her harsh words reached Nie Yan's ears, his heart rose with a slight anger. If this were the previous him, perhaps he would have already rushed up in a rage. However now, as a 28-year-old man, it just wasn't worth his time arguing with a snobbish brat who had barely reached adulthood. Lin Jia gazed at the receding figure of Nie Yan's back. She stared absent-mindedly as if she were looking at an illusion. From when she last recalled, Nie Yan didn't seem this muscular or robust. How is that possible? This guy is a famous matchstick known for always being frail and sickly. Even if he didn't move, he'd get sick and ask for a leave of absence. The tone of her voice contained a trace of mockery. "Lin Jia, who was that person just now?" asked a young man who went over to Lin Jia's side. His hair was dyed blonde, and he appeared to be in his early 20s. "That was one of my classmates. One of our honor students who ranked 3rd in literature." Lin Jia replied. Her expression immediately revealed a charming smile when she saw this young man coming over. Chapter 40. Setting New Records. Tisk, so what if he's an honor student? In my eyes, he's no more than fart. With a tiny body like that, I bet I could send him flying with a single punch. "Hey, babe. What say you and I head over to the hotel tonight and have some fun?" The young man named Bao Wei groped Lin Jia's perky buttocks with his perverted hand. A moment later, the hand began reaching deeper under her skirt. "Hee. You know this is my father's place, right? If he catches you, he might even beat you to death." Lin Jia rejected his advances and pushed his hand aside. Nevertheless, her actions and tone were quite gentle as she giggled while reprimanding him. Nie Yan inwardly sneered when he caught a glance of what was occurring back at the desk counter. Turning his back, he proceeded to the machines to test his strength. The first machine was to test his pulling strength. Nie Yan sat back and placed both hands on the grips of the machine. NHGH. He heavily grunted and pulled down on the machine handles. Under the sudden change in force, the machine's display began rapidly flashing with numbers.
60 kg, 80 kg, 100 kg, 161 kg, 162 kg.
Nie Yan released his grip on the handles when he couldn't hold on any longer. Ha! He gasped heavily for breath. The value was too lacking when compared to his previous self. However, relatively speaking, it could already be regarded as pretty good with his current physique. The following machine tested how much weight he could squat. Nie Yan walked up to it and began bearing its increasing weight on his back.
80 kilogramów, 90 kilogramów.
The number displayed on the machine steadily increased. It soon reached 90 kilograms, a weight which surpassed the limit of some amateur athlete fighters. "Hey, what are you looking at?" Bao Wei asked, nudging Lin Jia beside him. "How is this possible?" Lin Jia muttered to herself while gazing in a certain direction, her mind which was reeling back in extreme shock. "What's not possible?" Bao Wei turned his head to look in the same direction. He was left momentarily stunned as he stood there with his eyes widened and a blank expression on his face. It was quite evident Nie Yan's stature was on the somewhat small and thin side. Yet at this moment, his small body, which bore several times its own weight, was gradually lowering as he squatted down. If one looked, the screen on the squat machine displayed a value of over 160 kilograms. Such a scene was simply terrifying. What kind of monster was he? In international competitions, there was no lack of athletes squatting well over 1,000 kilograms. However, these people were all unequaled strong men who've gone through specialized training. For the average fighter, it was already quite excellent if they could squat 200 or 300 kilograms. Within a small town like Ningjiang, the number of people who could squat over 160 kilograms could still be counted on two hands. Just how did Nie Yan possess such a terrifying amount of strength with such a small and thin physique? After getting 160 kilograms on the squat machine, Nie Yan arrived beside the machine that tested punching strength. After a moment of stretching, Nie Yan entered a basic fighting stance. He resembled a cheetah in the moment he struck his fist out, The sound of his fist hitting the machine reverberated. The screen on the machine displayed a punching force of 130 kilograms. Punch strength, a new record has been set. Since Ningjiang was a small town, it was even rarer for an expert to frequent a place like the Lin family martial arts facility. 130 kilograms was all it took to set a new record in a facility? Others in less remote regions would have felt this was some sort of joke. My body's foundation isn't bad, Nie Yan thought, before walking over to the machine that tested reaction time. Leg strength, arm strength, core strength, etc. were the basic foundations of a fighter. Therefore, even if Nie Yan hadn't learned any fighting techniques, he could still become a city-level athlete fighter. He could easily enter the finals of a city-level competition solely by relying on his physical prowess. Reaction speed, a new record has been set. Kick strength, a new record has been set. Running speed, a new record has been set. Lin Jia was stunned as she watched Nie Yan set new records one after another in the facility. The world must have gone crazy. Was the person she looked at truly Nie Yan? As she recalled, Nie Yan had always been a feeble boy who would fall over from the slightest breeze. Who would have ever thought his inner aptitude was so surprisingly strong to an extent like this? All of the previous records in these machines were set by her father. However, 6 of them were now broken by Nie Yan. As for the others, Nie Yan's numbers were about the same as her father's. Since this was the case, wouldn't that mean Nie Yan was even stronger? Who is that guy? He's a monster. Bao Wei asked as his voice slightly trembled. This guy is even stronger than the bodyguards back home. Thank God I didn't mess with him earlier. Otherwise, with his strength, a single kick would break several of my ribs. Lin Jia had a sour feeling in her heart. Nie Yan had never shown off in front of her in such a way before. If she had known he was this strong, she would have already tried getting in bed with him long ago. From her perspective, a woman needed to be conquered by a man. The stronger the man was, the more sense of security she would feel. If only she had known he was this strong earlier. So what if he was poor as hell? With his strength, if he applied to enter the #1 military academy after graduation, she had no doubts he would easily be accepted. Entering the #1 military academy was equivalent to possessing a bright future. She only now understood how blind and foolish she was in the past. She had mistaken a precious jade for a useless pebble. My reaction speed still isn't fast enough. Nie Yan inwardly criticized. Reaction speed directly influenced the outcome of a fight. Moreover, reaction and thinking speed were both very important factors when playing Conviction as well. A large crowd was gathered in a circle around the facility's arena. They were there to spectate the two fighters who were in the middle of a spar. At this moment, however, everyone's attention was drawn solely onto Nie Yan. The crowd couldn't help but wonder, who was this terrifying brat? A quiet sense of fear radiated throughout the facility. Nie Yan raised his head and discovered everyone was staring at him. He glanced at the arena and saw two heavily built men standing there. They were both around 180 centimeters tall, and their bodies were covered in robust muscles. With a single look, anyone could tell they'd been training for a long time. At that moment, Nie Yan was slightly itching to test out his skill. He stared at those two men and asked without a second thought, "Hey, you two over there. Are you guys interested in having a spar?" "And no, there's no need." The taller man in blue gym shorts hurriedly declined as he felt his legs go somewhat soft. "No thanks, I'm fine as well." The other man in red gym shorts quickly declined as well. This was some sort of joke. Who in their right mind would fight someone who had a punching strength of 130 kilograms and kicking strength of 260 kilograms? Let alone them, this kind of monster would even sweep all of his competition in city-level tournaments. A single punch from him, and they'd most likely be hospitalized for 3 months. Nie Yan felt slightly disappointed after hearing their responses. It seems he wouldn't get the opportunity to experience the pleasure of a fight today. He looked at the time and noticed his 2 hours were almost up. He then turned back and headed for the reception desk. When Bao Wei, who was standing beside the desk, saw Nie Yan arriving, he revealed a flattering smile and made way for Nie Yan by retreating off to the side. Lin Jia tidied up her hair and revealed what she considered a charming smile. Nie Yan, however, felt it was quite nauseating. "I'm returning this." Nie Yan threw the card on the counter. "Brother Nie, there's no need to pay the fee for the 2 hours here. Consider it as me treating you. Furthermore, here's the reward for setting new records in the facility. Altogether, it's 26,000. Lin Jia took out a bank card and handed it over to Nie Yan. All training facilities gave out established rewards. If a patron came in and set a new record on one of the machines, they would receive some reward money. This was a sort of business. The records for the various machines were connected throughout the entire country. If a record was set, and the higher the test results, it could raise the influence of a facility. Thus, in order to attract more experts to their place, establishments used methods such as giving out rewards. 26,000 was roughly the amount of profit a large training facility made in a day. "Thanks." Nie Yan put the bank card in his pocket. Although he was disgusted by a person like Lin Jia, he wasn't one to make life difficult for someone who was handing him money. After receiving this money, he could use it to buy better nutritional supplements. "Brother Nie, I have some free time later tonight. Are you interested in having a drink with me at the evening trance tonight?" "It's my treat," Lin Jia asked, revealing an expression she considered to be seductive. The evening trance was a well-known drinking establishment in Ningjiang. It was also rather high-class with many sectioned-off private rooms installed inside the establishment, many of which were used to commit unsavory actions. Needless to say, Lin Jia's invitation was undoubtedly a dubious one. A man and a woman entering together in a private room, who wouldn't know what was going to happen? Although Lin Jia was somewhat good-looking, Nie Yan had met numerous beautiful women in his past life. Furthermore, how could Lin Jia ever compare to Xie Yao? "I'm sorry, I'll have to decline," Nie Yan disinterestedly replied. He turned around and walked towards the exit. Lin Jia originally believed that by relying on her beauty she could seduce Nie Yan. She never expected that she would immediately have the door slammed right in front of her face. She stood there momentarily puzzled. Wasn't Nie Yan always secretly in love with her? Wasn't she returning the feelings he had written for her in that love letter? Nie Yan's cold and indifferent attitude left her somewhat angry and resentful. Before walking out of the door, Nie Yan turned around and said, "When school starts, tell everyone in our class that I transferred schools and I'll visit them sometime in the future." "You're transferring schools? Where?" Lin Jia asked in surprise. "That's none of your business," Nie Yan replied, walking out of the facility. Since that guy rejected you, I'm free tonight. How about we head to the evening trance together?
Bao Wei happily lau ghét.
He then walked up and pinched Lin Jia's soft bosom. Scram! Lin Jia was in a terrible mood and angrily slapped Bao Wei's hand away. TSK. You're just a cheap slut who'd sleep with anyone. What's so great about you? Bao Wei sneered after being rejected by Lin Jia and turned to leave. Lin Jia gazed at Nie Yan's retreating back and spat out in disdain. Pah! Aren't you just a poor brat? Yet you're so high standard that even this lady here isn't good enough for you? However, Lin Jia understood the reality of the situation. Nie Yan's talent would most likely allow him to soar into the heavens. Thus, she could only stand there sourly and let out a few curses. Chapter 41. Vulgar Fellow. Nie Yan had a better understanding of his own strength after using the testing machines today. Although he was quite lacking compared to those expert fighters, he should still be able to handle himself if he came across unexpected circumstances. With $28,000 in reward money, Nie Yan headed to the department store to purchase 10 or so tubes of nutritional supplements, which were enough to last him for the rest of the month. Nie Yan continued exercising when he returned home. During the past few days, aside from gaming, he spent the rest of his time exercising and studying. As for other matters, he'd have to put them aside until his parents returned. Just like this, half a day quickly passed by. It was near 5 in the evening and the game servers would be opening soon. Nie Yan reclined on the bed with the gaming helmet on his head. As soon as he entered the game, he began to diligently train by grinding the surrounding water spiders. As several spiders met their deaths one after another by his hands, his experience bar gradually rose. He would level up shortly after 10 or so mobs. Nie Yan, where are you right now? Yao Yao asked Nie Yan through voice chat. I'm still at Lake Rando killing water spiders. Come to the Telek Town transfer point in 5 minutes. We're about to set off very soon. Bring that friend of yours over as well.
Alright, Nie Yan replied.
If that's all, I guess we'll meet in 5 minutes then. After disconnecting from the voice chat with Yao Yao, Nie Yan contacted Tang Yao at Telek Town transfer point. Our team is about to head out soon. Quickly get over there. This early? Tang Yao replied in surprise. His tone contained eagerness and pleasant surprise. Generally, people run dungeons as early in the day as possible rather than later. Besides, it's better to set off in the morning compared to the afternoon or evening. Gotcha, I'll head there right now, Tang Yao replied and hurriedly prepared himself to leave. Nie Yan checked his experience bar level 3, 99%. Filling up the remaining 1% would still require 10 minutes of grinding at the very least. Since it appeared he didn't have enough time, he took out a return scroll and began unraveling it. After 20 seconds and a brilliant flash of light, the scenery before his eyes shifted. He had returned to town. Where are you? Coordinates. Nie Yan asked Tang Yao through voice chat. Hey, I can see you. I'll come over, so stay where you are. Tang Yao came walking over from the plaza in the distance. He was garbed from head to toe in a fiery red mage robe. It appeared especially conspicuous within the crowd and attracted the envious gazes of the surrounding players. Tang Yao had even unconsciously straightened his back and puffed out his chest. The equipment he wore was a symbol of high honor because it represented the presence of an expert. So, how'd your practice at home go?
Nie Yan asked.
Tang Yao appeared to be full of energy when Nie Yan gazed at him. He no longer looked like the depressed and dispirited player he remembered in his past life. Not bad. You'll know in just a bit. I didn't improve by just a small amount either. Hey, listen to this. When I logged off, that brat Wei Kai actually called me up. That guy surprisingly wanted to curry some favor with us. He even asked for your phone number. Anyway, I made him my training partner and had several dozen matches with him. That guy didn't even win a single match. You sure he didn't just let you win? Nie Yan asked with a smile. In his mind, he knew this was exactly Wei Kai's style of handling affairs. You're underestimating me too much. I'm actually quite skillful now, you know? Hey, when Wei Kai called me up in the afternoon, he said you went to the Lin family martial arts facility. You didn't go there looking for Lin Jia, did you? I really couldn't believe it. How could you possibly like that woman? I heard she's already slept with many guys. That was back in middle school when I was still naive and young. Now, I don't have any interest in her. I only went to the facility to test out my strength. When I thought it over, I believed this was the most likely case as well. How could you possibly be attracted to Lin Jia? If you're looking for a girl, this brother here can help introduce you to one. Tang Yao laughed while he pat on Nie Yan's shoulder. With the type of girls you're acquainted with, it's better if you keep them to yourself. Nie Yan rolled his eyes at Tang Yao's antics. A sweet fragrance entered Nie Yan's nose. The scent belonged to a lily perfume sold in NPC stores. It was simple, elegant, and pleasant to the nose. He knew exactly who had arrived the moment this scent entered his nose. All you think about is things like picking up girls all day. I knew you weren't a good person, Yao Yao muttered to herself. Nie Yan knowingly smiled when he heard this voice. He turned his head and saw Yao Yao's charming figure standing right behind him. She was dressed in a pure white mage gown. It was like mercury falling, complementing her perfect body. Her hair hung down, and the pink kerchief she had tied over her head made her appear all the more lovely. It was as if she walked out from the canvas of a beautiful painting. Tang Yao stared at the beautiful Yao Yao standing by Nie Yan's side with saliva almost dripping from his mouth. He stood there with a blank expression for what seemed like half a day before elbowing Nie Yan in the side. So beautiful! A first-rate beauty! Oh my God! Nie Yan, is this your girlfriend? What are you saying? Who are you saying is his girlfriend? Yao Yao's eyes widened into a furious glare. She was absolutely fuming. Before her eyes, this vulgar fellow surprisingly said she was Nie Yan's girlfriend. Humph! Indeed, birds of a feather do flock together. Exactly, birds of a feather do flock together. Otherwise, you also wouldn't have come here looking for us. Nie Yan laughed while teasing Yao Yao. Why you? Humph! This magnanimous lady is going to ignore you. Senior sister Yulan, Blue Feather, and the rest of them are already at the transfer point. Let's go and meet up with them. Since she couldn't outwit Nie Yan, Yao Yao quickly changed the subject. Tang Yao suddenly realized something as he watched the Nie Yan and Yao Yao bickering. What was it called again? He seemed to have forgotten. Oh, that's right, it's definitely this. It was a lover's quarrel. He had seen many couples that enjoyed bickering like this before. Although Tang Yao himself was a person who was usually lecherous and full of hormones, he still held some principles. He might take away another person's woman, but when it came to his own brothers, he definitely wouldn't interfere. Tang Yao mentally gave Nie Yan's a thumbs up and secretly whispered, "You do have some skill after all." Tang Yao's mentality immediately diverged. From then on, he viewed Yao Yao as nothing more than a potential friend. Seeing this, Nie Yan couldn't help smiling. However, he was too lazy to explain. Besides, when it came to these matters, explaining them would only make things messier. The three began walking in the direction of the transfer point. Nie Yan, is this your friend? That guy has a vulgar appearance, but it looks like his equipment is pretty good. What kind of equipment is he wearing? Yao Yao curiously asked. Tang Yao's cheeks were streaming with tears. Why was this beautiful woman right beside him, when describing his appearance, not using words like confident, dashing, or crushingly handsome, but instead using words like vulgar? Fire chaser set, Nie Yan replied. He noticed Yao Yao's hair beneath her kerchief was folded into several layers. The irregular arrangement was quite charming and revealed it was done with the utmost care. The fire chaser set dropped from Black Flame Forest? Yao Yao exclaimed in surprise. She knew Black Flame Forest was a much more difficult dungeon compared to Treyant Forest. Only the elite teams from large guilds would enter these dungeons. After realizing this, Yao Yao couldn't help but look at Tang Yao in a new light. Those who were able to run Black Flame Forest were definitely experts. I never expected this wretched fatty was actually a powerful expert. Tang Yao had advanced from a vulgar person into a wretched fatty. However, after Yao Yao added that he was a powerful expert, Tang Yao felt slightly better, even somewhat proud of himself. He also had somewhat of a guilty conscience. This title of expert was merely a forgery. When compared to genuine experts, he was still lacking by a whole grade. Nie Yan, my kerchief is pretty, isn't it? It was a drop I got from farming in the Radiant Ruins. It's holy damage +3. Yao Yao did a little spin. Her fluttering mage gown resembled a snow lotus in bloom as her kerchief danced in the air. To an onlooker, it was especially moving. It seemed she still held the slight temperament of a child. If she had something nice, she couldn't help but show it off. Moreover, the displeasure she held towards Nie Yan from their prior conversation appeared to have been completely forgotten. "Aha, it does look very pretty," Nie Yan replied with a nod of his head. Yao Yao had this magical characteristic about her. She was able to let any person completely forget about their worries. "Brother, not bad. You should make your move at the first opportunity. Otherwise, she'll get taken away by another person and it would be too late to regret by then." Chapter 42, Temporary Team for Treyant Forest. The three soon arrived at the Transfer Point Plaza. There, a group of 10 or so players was waiting together, crowded together like how the stars cup themselves around the moon. At the center of their attention was a curvaceous beauty in azure armor. "Senior Sister Yulan, Blue Feather, they're here." Yao Yao walked to Yulan's side. The two gorgeous beauties standing side by side were an especially stunning sight to behold. "What luck! We're encountering beauties as soon as we set out. So beautiful! So gorgeous!"
Tang Yao softly whispered.
This little scoundrel was a lecherous pervert who wouldn't change even if you beat him to death. He enjoyed looking at beautiful women, but he knew very well that most of these beauties would never put him in their eyes. Therefore, he did nothing more than ogle. "Pleasure to meet you," Yulan said, facing Nie Yan and Tang Yao. She carefully observed Nie Yan. Although his appearance seemed somewhat juvenile, his calm and unhurried bearing made him look quite composed. The most noticeable trait was the air of confidence and decisiveness that surrounded him. Since she could still be regarded as experienced and knowledgeable, she could discern he possessed some of the special characteristics of an expert. As for the fatty standing by his side, she didn't know what to make of him. Likewise, Nie Yan slightly nodded in reply. Yulan's complete set of azure armor perfectly revealed the curves of her model-like figure. A glimpse of her deep cleavage could be seen in the opening near her chest. From head to toe, she radiated a fatal, wild attractiveness. She undoubtedly possessed the best figure out of all the women he had met before. Moreover, she had a beautiful face as well. This devastating combination was practically capable of seducing men to their deaths. In spite of this, Nie Yan held no interest or desires towards her. Tang Yao, however, had a little trouble shifting his gaze. When comparing Yao Yao and Yulan, the latter evidently suited his tastes much more. "Take care, this beauty is someone even I don't dare to provoke," Nie Yan secretly informed Tang Yao. Hello," Tang Yao stumbled as he greeted her in an overly reserved manner. Nie Yan's eyes widened in surprise. This little scoundrel often couldn't restrain himself when in front of beautiful women due to his perverted nature and natural tendencies as a chatterbox. However, today, Nie Yan was witnessing an unprecedented event. This chatterbox was acting quite shy and reserved. "Am I dreaming? Did the sun rise from the west this morning? All right, let's get ready to set off for the dungeon. If you have something to say, we'll talk on the road there." Yulan consistently paid attention to efficiency, thus she didn't want to waste any more time standing around. "Remember our prior agreement. I'll be acting as team captain during the run, so I want everyone listening to my arrangements," Nie Yan promptly reminded Yulan. His gaze was sharp and resolute. "All right." Yulan nodded in reply. She turned around and addressed the rest of her team. "I'm disbanding the team. In a moment, accept Nie Yan's invite to form a team. He'll be temporarily acting as team captain, so listen to his arrangements." Nie Yan wasn't unfamiliar with this Chen Bo. He was a classmate of Yulan and they were quite familiar with each other. In the past, he had always been pursuing Yulan, but after meeting Yao Yao, his mind went into a state of chaos. He liked all beauties. So, he didn't know which one he should pursue. Therefore, he decided to make both his property and became unwilling to let any others come near the two. However, to his misfortune, both girls greatly disliked him and as a result, he ended up getting neither. Simply put, he was merely a useless brat with some wealth who got smitten with any beauty he laid eyes on. In Nie Yan's past life, this scoundrel was a walking tragedy. In this life, after encountering Nie Yan, it appeared he was still destined to become a walking tragedy.
You are. I'm called Chen Bo.
Morning Wood. Oh, I see. So it was elder brother Morning Wood. Nie Yan's tone dripped with sarcasm. He feigned surprise and acted as if Chen Bo's input held great importance. I said my name is Chen Bo. The same Chen, as in the surname. And the Bo in enormous.
Chen Bo replied in an irritated tone.
I did say Morning Wood. I didn't speak incorrectly, did I? Nie Yan innocently gazed at Tang Yao by his side. Tang Yao clearly understood what was going on. Nie Yan was simply messing with Chen Bo and mispronouncing his name on purpose. Tang Yao was practically dying as he held back a belly full of laughter. He restrained himself and said with a smiling expression, Right, you didn't speak incorrectly. You did say Morning Wood. Tang Yao even purposefully enunciated the two words in a serious tone. However, from the smiling expressions on their faces, it was clear they weren't pronouncing Chen Bo's name correctly and were pronouncing it as Morning Wood instead. Granted, even if the person were an idiot, they would clearly understand what was going on. Yao Yao flashed a beautiful smile as two dimples emerged on her face. She shot a glance at Nie Yan, feigning displeasure. This guy is too awful. You can't just humiliate people like this. The majority of people she and Yulan met were quite reserved while in front of them. That being said, Nie Yan's frank and forthright manner of speaking didn't arouse her disgust. On the contrary, she felt Nie Yan was different from people like Chen Bo who often hid their true intentions and acted in an extremely hypocritical manner. Yulan also slightly showed signs of being unable to hold back her laughter. Seeing Chen Bo on the brink of lividness, she hurriedly took on the role of peacemaker and said, Forget it, he was just joking around. Nie Yan, go create the team. Nie Yan sent everyone in Yulan's group an invite, Chen Bo included. Chen Bo had the faint urge of lashing out. Nie Yan fixed his expression and announced in a stern and severe tone, If you've accepted me as team captain, you will unconditionally obey my commands as long as you're within my team. If you have any misgivings or objections, you can come looking for me after the run and settle it then. Anyone unwilling is free to leave the team right now. We can still find others to fill your spot. If you attempt to cause mischief or join with malicious intent, even if the team is completely wiped during the run, the ones suffering losses, in the end, are still yourselves. 20% of your experience bar. I think it'll still take quite some time to fill back up, right? As Nie Yan spoke, he simultaneously swept his gaze over everyone present. His imposing stature was reminiscent of a true leader. Not a single person dared to look him straight in the eye. The crowd slowly discussed amongst themselves. After a short while, the people in the group began subsequently accepting the invitation. System. Yulan has joined your team. System. Yao Yao has joined your team. System. Bottled water has joined your team. Nie Yan was quite imposing. Yulan's eyes flashed with praise after evaluating his performance. Perhaps he really could carry them through the Trey-Ant forest. Yulan followed in a stern tone as well. Regard Nie Yan's orders as team captain as if they were given by me. Anyone who fails to comply might as well quit the team, because in the future, our team will no longer have such a person. The crowd immediately quieted down. As her own team members, they knew this type of order was extremely severe. After being in a team with each other for so long, they were quite familiar with one another and had established amicable friendships with their surrounding teammates. If they were forced to leave the team, where would they go? Even if they found another team, one that was capable of running a 20-player dungeon like Trey-Ant Forest was extremely difficult to find. Chen Bo held a resentful expression and was prepared to speak out. However, Yulan's severe gaze suddenly focused on him. Chen Bo, who was on the verge of speaking his mind, immediately swallowed his words back down his throat. System. Chen Bo has joined your team. Since all of you have already entered my team, don't blame me if I immediately kick you for disobeying orders. Our objective here is the same. We're here for the sake of getting some equipment and nothing else. If things go smoothly, we may be able to pick up even more equipment. If no issues arise, everyone here can gain at least 20% of a level. If there's anyone who wants to secretly sabotage the run, the damages inflicted on the entire team will be solely placed on them. The people next to you are all your fellow companions. Don't think it's necessary to make things difficult for your own people. If it appears I'm unsuitable to lead and cause mistakes to arise, I'll hand over 10 silvers to your captain, which can be considered compensation for you team. Nie Yan said. He swept his gaze over everyone present and stopped on Chen Bo. If it weren't for the fact that this high-level dungeon dropped a certain jewel, he wouldn't have even bothered coming here. Many players within the group were quite dissatisfied with Nie Yan. However, they had no choice but to concede. Nie Yan's words were quite reasonable. If they absolutely wanted to make things difficult for him, it would be the same as making things difficult for themselves. Harming others without benefiting yourself? It wasn't worth the trouble. They could only oblige themselves to listen to Nie Yan for the time being. He even gave his word and said he'd compensate the team with 10 silvers if huge mistakes occurred because he was unsuitable as team captain. This could already be regarded as extremely benevolent. We've already been wiped in this dungeon twice. It wouldn't be a strange matter if we ended up getting wiped once again. Besides, those elite teams from the large guilds frequently get wiped all the time too. We're going to the Treyant Forest simply to feel things out. As for those 10 silvers, how could we possibly be so shameless as to ask Brother Nie Yan for it? The one who spoke within the team was a fighter called by Kai Shui, plain boiled water. He could be regarded as one of those players who were fair and just. One by one, the surrounding members also began agreeing with his reasoning, and their impression of Nie Yan somewhat changed as well. Chapter 43, Prior to Departure. Since that's the case, I'll start handing out orders now. By Kai Shui, plain boiled water, fighter, 61 defense, 230 health, and 27 attack, by Kai Shui replied. Many of the players within the team looked at each other with embarrassed expressions. Among the average player, they were considered relatively strong experts with deep pockets, but in reality, the total wealth they had on hand absolutely didn't exceed 1 silver. Items like basic haste scrolls, basic strength scrolls, basic intellect scrolls, etc., easily cost upwards of 20 coppers. Wasn't this kind of expenditure rather extreme? Even if they cleared Treyant Forest, they were still unsure of the profit they'd receive. Humph! Buying so many scrolls. If I was the leader and had so many scrolls, we'd be able to clear the dungeon too, Chen Bo muttered to himself. Chen Bo was repeatedly making things difficult for Nie Yan. Tang Yao, who had witnessed all of this on the side, was put in quite a foul mood. Could it be that you can't afford it? If you don't have the money to buy something as cheap as a scroll, I can always lend you a bit first, Tang Yao provoked, staring at Chen Bo with a disdainful gaze. 20 coppers is nothing. It's not like this young master here can't afford it. However, this guy here clearly has selfish motives. Why isn't he making you buy basic intellect scrolls, and instead making us spend all the money? Chen Bo retorted without holding back any accusations. Chen Bo's accusations gave rise to doubts among the crowd as they stared suspiciously at Nie Yan. They were all in a team together. However, if Nie Yan clearly favored his own people and deliberately made their side spend more money, then that would simply be an extremely callous and deceptive behavior, one that they could not tolerate. During the whole ordeal, Tang Yao wasn't able to give the reason why. The corner of Chen Bo's mouth curved into a sneer and he said, "What? You don't have anything to say now?" The surrounding crowd waited for Nie Yan's reply. If he didn't give them a suitable explanation, the crowd most likely wouldn't let him off so easily. You figured something out? You haven't figured out piss. My brother is wearing the full fire chaser set. His magic damage is already over 50. Does he need to buy basic intellect scrolls then? He already has a hard enough time controlling his damage as it is. Does he need a basic intellect scroll to increase his magic damage further? Do you want the boss to switch aggro and split him in half?
Nie Yan ruthlessly rebuked.
Nie Yan's words held another implication. With the equipment Tang Yao possessed, the elite teams from large guilds would be more than happy to have him if he wanted to run a dungeon with them. Accompanying Yu Lan's team into the dungeon was the same as using a sledgehammer to crack a walnut. It was simply a waste of his talents. It was already a show of respect by showing up here, yet they still wanted to make more demands and even threw out accusations? Many of the team members, after hearing Nie Yan's words, held faces full of shame. Their expressions greatly changed as they gazed at the equipment on Tang Yao's body. This was, in fact, the Fire Chaser set. It was a symbol of honor. It was a sign that a player had conquered Black Flame Forest. If Tang Yao had already cleared Black Flame Forest, it meant he had long since gotten everything he needed from a lower-level dungeon like Treyant Forest. Yet, he had still come back here to run this dungeon with them. This alone meant he was giving their team a tremendous amount of face. Seeing the changed expressions of the surrounding crowd, Tang Yao subconsciously straightened his back. Being adored and respected by the crowd made him feel rather satisfied. Thus, Tang Yao inwardly confirmed his resolve. If I'm going to wear this kind of equipment, I shouldn't lose any face. At the very least, I've got to show the bearing of an expert. Chen Bo was momentarily left speechless. Nie Yan had ruthlessly suppressed him, and he simply had no means to retort. Yulan glanced at Tang Yao and carefully examined the equipment on his body. Even I couldn't recognize it at first. This wretched fatty is actually an expert. I want everyone who was called out to go and buy their respective scrolls, Yulan ordered. However, she was left wondering. Even if they cleared Treyant Forest, would they still be able to gain a positive return after buying so many scrolls? The members whose names were mentioned left to purchase scrolls. They had already bought all the consumables they needed beforehand, so making a return trip to the stores wouldn't waste too much time. Nie Yan, do we really need so many scrolls to clear Treyant Forest? Yao Yao asked while her elegant eyes stared fixedly at Nie Yan. From her memory, the larger team she knew didn't use this many scrolls when they cleared Treyant Forest. You'll know when the time comes. I am absolutely not wasting money by making them buy these scrolls, Nie Yan replied. Even if it were the elite teams from the large guilds, he reckoned they only cleared the normal difficulty Treyant Forest. However, the difficulty he was aiming for was the hardest one, Specialist. Superscript 1. It was impossible for them to clear the run without these scrolls.
N.
Yao Yao blinked and nodded her head. Despite only knowing Nie Yan for several days, she was certain of one little thing. He was definitely someone who was capable and in no way would do something for no reason. After a short while, the people who were called out returned with their scrolls purchased. Nie Yan did roll call. All 19 people including him were present and accounted for. Is there anyone here who can invite a strong mage to join us? I'd be more reassured if there was another high-damage mage with us, Nie Yan asked Yulan and her team. That's going to be a little hard to do. Yulan replied in a somewhat awkward tone. For the most part, mages who had high damage were already in fixed teams, so where could they go looking for one? I can find one. I have a classmate who belongs in Radiant Sacred Flame Guild's elite team. Their team has recently been preparing for Black Flame Forest, but by chance, my classmate has some free time today, Yao Yao interjected. Male or female? How's their skill? Yulan asked. He's a male and really strong too, Yao Yao replied. Radiant Sacred Flame Guild? Forget it then. Nie Yan shook his head and said. Why? Yao Yao inquisitively asked. I've already killed several of their guild members. Right now they have a hit order on me, Nie Yan straightforwardly replied without holding anything back. Even if the Radiant Sacred Flame Guild knew he was here, what could they do about it? Last time, everyone in my party except for me was wiped out by the Radiant Sacred Flame Guild. My brother here single-handedly killed 7 or 8 of them to save me.
Tang Yao proudly flaunted Nie Yan's accomplishments.
He couldn't help but show off to everyone present that he and Nie Yan were brothers. They were a weak group. All their players were full of beginners. Nie Yan didn't feel it was anything significant. I say, you only killed off a few noobs and you think you're so terrific? I've killed entire teams before.
Chen Bo suddenly interrupted.
A sneer was on his face, and his expression was full of ridicule. Chen Bo's words infuriated Tang Yao by no small amount. The players Nie Yan killed were by no means beginners. Among them, there was even a player with the full Fire Chaser set. He was just about to retort, but Nie Yan held him back. Thus he could only suppress his anger in silence. Yulan crossed her arms across her chest and examined Nie Yan. Since he wasn't a brash person who liked to flaunt his accomplishments, it appeared Tang Yao's words were most likely true. After all, those who were able to corner an expert-level figure like Tang Yao definitely couldn't be simple. It seemed Nie Yan wasn't only skillful in dungeons, but in player-versus-player situations as well. Chapter 44. Dusk, the Arcane Mage. Who are we going to find then? Yao Yao asked. She believed even if her classmate was part of the Radiant Sacred Flame Guild, it wasn't as if he and Nie Yan were ever in direct conflict. Therefore, it didn't necessarily mean their tensions couldn't be eased. Perhaps in the future, she could even introduce them to one another and have them get to know each other. However, she chose to put this idea off until another time. After giving it some thought, Bai Kai Shui, plain boiled water, interjected with his own suggestion. I know a person. They're an arcane mage from Holy Empire. His name is Dusk, Huang Hun, and his magic damage is 52. Though, I don't know if he'd be interested in running this dungeon with us. He and his team have already cleared Black Flame Forest and are preparing for Agmoda Muddy Wetlands, so I don't know if he'd be willing to come back to Treyant Forest again. I'll give him a call anyway. A brief moment later, Yulan asked, Bai Kai Shui, how did it go? Is he willing? He agreed. Bai Kai Shui replied in excitement. This truly was unexpected. They had only met several times in the past when they partied up to grind mobs. Dusk had given Bai Kai Shui quite a bit of face by agreeing to come. Great! We now have exactly 20 players. We'll set out the moment he arrives, Nie Yan said, nodding his head. Surprisingly, it was someone from Holy Empire. A great opportunity was presenting itself to him. Brother Bai Kai Shui does indeed possess a lot of face. He's even able to invite someone from Holy Empire.
Chen praised.
He shot a glance at Nie Yan and Tang Yao. If this dungeon run were to go without a hitch, he couldn't say for sure they wouldn't be frequent additions to their team activities. He had to find some way of driving these two uninvited guests out of the team and maybe even rope in a few others to help him. How can that be? He's the one who's giving me face. Bai Kai Shui was practically glowing with joy. He also felt quite proud of his accomplishment. That kind of person is a true expert. His team is already preparing to run Agmoda Muddy Wetlands. He's definitely cleared Treyant Forest, so I think it's best if we make that person the team captain instead. Chen Bo shot a glance at Nie Yan and Tang Yao. This bastard Chen Bo infuriated Tang Yao by no small measure. If it weren't for Nie Yan who held him back, he would have lashed out long ago. True, if he's cleared Treyant Forest before, it wouldn't be a bad idea to let him be team captain, Nie Yan replied in a dull tone. Oh, so you realized your own incompetence? If you had realized it earlier, then there wouldn't have been a need for you to foolishly show off. Since Chen Bo was given an inch, he attempted to take a mile. He was a person with no sense of propriety.
Chen Bo.
Yulan knitted her brows and called out in a displeased tone. She was rather annoyed with his behavior. Met with Yulan's reaction, Chen Bo muttered a few words to himself but no longer said anything more. After a short while, the surrounding area flashed with a brilliant light and a figure emerged from the Telek Town transfer point. It was an arcane mage who wore a black-colored mage robe. The man had the appearance of a person in their late 20s. His black mage robes were inscribed with various strange magical runes, and he exuded a mysterious and dignified aura. Nie Yan gave him a quick glance. He could tell this person was wearing the Arcane Mage's Dark Winter set. Presently, it was a top-notch equipment set for arcane mages. This set and Tang Yao's Fire Chaser set were both on the same level. However, the Fire Chaser set suited elementalists more while the Dark Winter set suited arcane mages. Therefore, for an arcane mage, the Dark Winter set was much more preferable than the Fire Chaser set. Hey, Brother Dusk. Long time no see. Bai Kai Shui walked forward to welcome him. Long time no see. Dusk also walked up and exchanged greetings with Bai Kai Shui. He gave the crowd a quick glance and said, "Hello everyone." These words were spoken with a slight arrogance. He was a member of Holy Empire's elite team. His elite team and Yu Lan's small team were on a completely different level. He decided to come because Bai Kai Shui's personality was decent and he had a slight friendship with him. Moreover, he had some free time because his team was making preparations for Agmota Muddy Wetlands. If it weren't for these two factors, he wouldn't have even bothered paying this small team any attention. "This is our team captain, Yu Lan." Bai Kai Shui introduced Yu Lan to his friend. Dusk nodded at Yu Lan and smiled. "I didn't expect your team captain was actually such a beauty. Pleased to make your acquaintance." Dusk greeted Yu Lan. This was their first meeting, and he didn't reveal the slightest bit of impoliteness when met with a beauty such as Yu Lan. He appeared refined and courteous without lacking the slightest bit of elegance. Yu Lan replied with a slight nod of her head. "Pleased to meet you." This Dusk did indeed possess the bearing of an expert. Chen Bo shuffled to Bai Kai Shui's side. He hoped Bai Kai Shui would lend him a helping hand in introducing him to the expert. However, when Dusk noticed Nie Yan standing at the back of the crowd, his eyes widened in surprise and he walked over to greet Nie Yan. "I never thought Brother Nie Yan would be in a place like this," Dusk exclaimed in a pleasantly surprised tone. "You are?" Nie Yan mumbled as if trying to recall who this person was. He remembered now. Back at Link Town, there was such a person standing by Sleepy Fox's side. "You don't recognize me, but I recognize you. Previously, when our guild leader invited you to run Agmota Muddy Wetlands, I was standing right behind him. Brother Nie Yan truly is skilled. You managed to trip Swift Slash and cause him to fall at the most crucial moment." Dusk was in high spirits as he mentioned Nie Yan's accomplishment. When the surrounding crowd heard Dusk's words, they cast their curious gazes towards Nie Yan and wondered just what kind of background he had. He even knew Holy Empire's guild leader. As for Swift Slash, they seemed to recall he was the Dark Massacre's guild leader. Every person Nie Yan had come in contact with had a terrifying amount of influence. "You know Brother Nie Yan?" Bai Kai Shui asked with an astonished expression. "Not only do I know him, Brother Nie Yan is even currently a celebrity among our Holy Empire guild members. When our guild leader invited him to run Agmota Muddy Wetlands together, Brother Nie Yan imposed the harsh demand of getting the first pick on all thief equipment. Not a single person in our guild would have dared to speak in such a way to our guild leader, but surprisingly our guild leader agreed to Brother Nie Yan's conditions." Dusk replied. He was a straightforward person, and he didn't attempt to conceal any of the admiration he held for Nie Yan. The crowd looked at each other in shock. Who was Sleepy Fox? He was the guild leader of Holy Empire, a legendary player among the player base. Nie Yan even set conditions when the guild leader of Holy Empire invited him to run Agmota Muddy Swamplands together. Didn't this clearly signify Sleepy Fox was the one currying favor with Nie Yan? As the guild leader of Holy Empire, how could Sleepy Fox's judgment possibly be lacking? Going by that logic, wouldn't this mean Nie Yan was a godlike figure who didn't heed the most elite teams even if they begged him to come? If that was the case, Nie Yan's conditions for running Treyant Forest with their own team were actually rather light. Dusk was a member of Holy Empire. It was unlikely his words were a lie. "Yao Yao, it seems you actually invited an esteemed expert to help us," Yu Lan teased in a joking manner. Yao Yao's eyebrow curved into crescents. Her face was brimming with joy from the pride she felt. Chen Bo didn't anticipate Nie Yan to have such a powerful background. He finally became aware that he and Nie Yan weren't on the same standing. As if he were a shriveled eggplant, he stood foolishly to the side, seething in anger when a malicious thought came to mind. When the crowd gazed at Nie Yan, their eyes flashed with a peculiar glint. Each and every one of them was trying to guess what sort of background he had. Tang Yao was the happiest among all of them. He elbowed Nie Yan in the side and whispered, "Not bad, Brother Nie Yan, why are you still running Treyant Forest?" Dusk curiously asked. Chapter 45. Specialist Difficulty. Feather Fall Jewel? What kind of item is that? We've run this dungeon 5 or 6 times in the past, and we've never once gotten any featherfall jewel, Dusk exclaimed in surprise. Dusk didn't know what the featherfall jewel was because it was only a drop on the specialist difficulty. Dusk felt slightly puzzled. However, after giving it some thought, he realized since Nie Yan wasn't telling him now, he'd eventually find out with the rest of the team later. This Tang Yao's equipment is a bit strange. Tang Yao slightly reddened in embarrassment upon hearing their conversation. He really did have somewhat of a guilty conscience when wearing this fire chaser set. However, this made him even more determined. He definitely needed to get a hold of a first-rate equipment set for his class with his own power. Only then could he gain some confidence and have some self-respect for himself. Nie Yan, how did you meet the Holy Empire's guild leader? Yao Yao asked. I still feel the event was a little strange. After the party of 20 players passed through a wide open prairie, they were met with a lush and verdant forest at the base of a faraway mountainside. Traiant Forest was still relatively difficult for the average player. Presently within Conviction, there were in total 36 level 5 or below 20-player dungeons scattered across the Viridian Empire's domain. Their difficulty, boss, invite me to the team please. Brother, is your team lacking any members? Bai Kai Shui, plain boiled water, walked forward to deal with the crowd. We're full. Everyone, go look somewhere else please. Upon hearing Bai Kai Shui's words, the surrounding players had no choice but to leave in low spirits. You guys wait here. I'm going to apply to enter the dungeon, Nie Yan announced and began walking over to the glowing monolith near the dungeon's entrance. When he neared it, he extended his hand and touched it, whereupon he felt a bizarre sensation enter his mind. Before entering this lush forest, you happen upon a strange block of stone. The stone block is engraved with various eccentric writing, which read as follows: Forest walkers, traiants they absorb dew under the light of the early morning sun. The sound of a caretaker's flute floats between the leaves. The tree spirits that have slumbered since the times of antiquity, awaken. You are reminded. An official from the Viridian Empire told you there were signs of activity from dark elves in this area. You mutter to yourself, these damn dark elves. When will they stop? System. Do you wish to enter Traiant Forest? Yes.
Nie Yan hit confirm.
System. Please select a difficulty. Easy, normal, hard, expert, specialist. Specialist. System. Are you sure? Yes. In the moment Nie Yan confirmed his selection, a brilliant light flashed through the eyes of each and every team member. When they regained their vision, they noticed they had emerged on a thick patch of grass within the forest. Although the sunlight was still able to penetrate through the foliage of the trees, the atmosphere surrounding the area still remained somewhat sinister and eerie. System. You have entered Traiant Forest. Difficulty, Specialist. The other 19 members of the team also received the same notification. Each and every one of them looked on in horror upon reading it. Why is it Specialist difficulty? Captain Nie Yan, did you pick the wrong difficulty? Why is it Specialist? Yeah, how can we possibly clear Specialist difficulty? The surrounding team members were anxious and worried. Yulan looked over at Nie Yan and noticed his expression was still unperturbed. From what she knew of his personality, how could he possibly make such a rudimentary mistake? Unless he intentionally chose this difficulty. If she recalled correctly, no one had ever cleared, or more so, even dared to attempt Trent Forest on Specialist so far. Let alone Traiant Forest, even the lowest level dungeons would become unreasonably difficult on Specialist difficulty. Since I brought you guys in, I naturally have a method to bring you out, Nie Yan calmly announced. What kind of bullshit are you spouting? Up until now, there hasn't been a single team who's been able to clear Traiant Forest on Specialist, and you think we of all people can do it? Our team can't even clear this F*King dungeon on easy. Don't drag us into your mess just because you want to show off. Chen Bo ridiculed in an extremely irritated tone. Is this guy really your friend? Upon witnessing Chen Bo's rude outburst, Dusk, who was by Nie Yan's side, could no longer remain silent. No, he's not. Nie Yan shook his head. If a team member dared to speak so rudely to our captain in the team, he would have been kicked by the captain long ago. No one would allow such a person to speak so much rubbish in the first place. Dusk sneered. However, he didn't look at Chen Bo. He didn't even bother acknowledging the existence his words were referencing to. He turned to face Nie Yan, who was by his side, and said with a smile, "I must say, Brother Nie is quite a tolerant person." From Dusk's perspective, Nie Yan chose the specialist difficulty because he had the confidence to clear it. This run actually held some meaning to it now. Initially, he only came here to grind mobs to kill time. Who would have expected he'd meet a rare opportunity instead? Chen Bo was infuriated, but what could he do? Dusk was invited to the run by Kai Shui, so offending him was the same as offending by Kai Shui. If this were to occur, it would inevitably lead him to become ostracized on the team.
Chen Bo.
Nie Yan is a friend I personally invited to the run. If you have any complaints regarding my decision, be upfront about it and tell me instead. Yao Yao sharply rebuked and knitted her brows. It was most likely for her sake that Nie Yan didn't bother with Chen Bo, or lower himself to Chen Bo's level. After all, Nie Yan didn't want Yao Yao to be shunned for inviting a friend who made trouble within their team. If she didn't speak out for Nie Yan now, it would be too much of a disgrace. Yao Yao! It's not like that. Chen Bo hurriedly tried to explain when he saw Yao Yao was getting upset. However, Yao Yao coldly snorted and turned her head away. I'm only someone who was invited to their team. I'll be leaving after we clear this run. Everyone else is simply cooperating with me. After all, I'm not the captain of any team. The real team captain is this beauty over there, Nie Yan explained to Dusk and glanced at Yulan by his side. Truthfully, Nie Yan wasn't such a tolerant person. Chen Bo had already crossed the line and offended him long ago. Therefore Nie Yan would certainly teach him a proper lesson in the future. However, when handling a type of person like Chen Bo, Nie Yan would simply be degrading himself if he were to deal with him directly. Chen Bo, shut your mouth right now. Otherwise, don't blame me for being impolite.
Iulang Scolet.
She then apologized to Nie Yan. I'm really sorry. He just has this sort of unpleasant temper. I'd like to apologize to Brother Nie Yan on his behalf. Yulan also felt quite humiliated because of Chen Bo's behavior. She and Chen Bo had been classmates for over 10 years. Their parents were on good terms with each other, so she couldn't afford to act too coldly towards Chen Bo. Chen Bo never thought even Yulan would speak up against him for the sake of these strangers. He stared daggers at Nie Yan and Dusk, then resentfully turned his head away. Dusk also felt bickering with Chen Bo would only be degrading himself, so he changed the topic. I assume Brother Nie Yan has already made the necessary preparations? Otherwise, you wouldn't have selected specialist difficulty. Since he was one of the people under Sleepy Fox's command, he also wanted to examine how much ability Nie Yan had. Specialist isn't actually that difficult. The mob health is only increased by 30%. It's quite easy to handle if we have tanks with enough defense and mages with high damage. However, the changes to the boss, Treant King, are quite distinct. I'll let you guys know about them when the times comes, Nie Yan reassured the rest of the team. Nie Yan had spoken as if the whole matter was trivial, but Dusk understood the true significance of mobs gaining 30% extra health. What did it mean? It meant if the tank fell short by even 1% of health, or lacked even a single point of defense, their team would be wiped. It meant if the mages were lacking by even a single point of damage, their team would be wiped. Just where did Nie Yan's confidence come from?